right, let's give it a shot.
Okay. So we're going to start from the top?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is, in your view, what are the different stages of a relationship from interest all the way to marriage?
Right. Okay. So, in my view, and I have, I guess, a more, it can be controversial, or there can be different opinions that differ than mine. Um, but the different stages, I think, do not have to be as confusing as they're made out to be. Uh, eh, and I know here at the college, here at the church, sometimes it is practiced. The blurring of these lines are practiced a little too often, especially when it comes to the interest stage, or it comes to talking, this stage of non-committal, where people are just spending a whole lot of time with each other without any explicit verbalized commitments or non-commitments. Explicit verbalized commitments to say, look, we're hanging out, obviously, and you seem like a really great person, but we're not in a committed relationship here, and we're friends, and that's fine. But I think from interest to engagement, the first stage, of course, is I think is when a young man finds an interest in a young woman. Now, it could be the other way around. However, it is not common practice for a young lady to intentionally pursue a young man, though I have seen it done, and that's not necessarily wrong, but it's not common practice, and because of that, you are more likely to be misunderstood as a young lady pursuing. But the first stage is interest, and
Would you say that first stage is what people call talking?
yes and no.
Because if we could replace the word talking with interest, I mean, I think that would be great. If we could just eliminate the talking stage, because
Yeah.
it's not even a real stage.
Right,
At
right,
this
right.
point, it's been polluted to be, I am interested in you. The emotional gratification I'm getting from having your attention is great, but I don't want to commit to you. And I don't have
Yeah.
a plan to commit to you.
Yeah.
So we're just talking.
I do think interest and talking are unique, though, and I'm all for replacing the talking phase, as you mentioned. But interest is really completely unspoken.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm. Oh, okay, I see.
it's the and this
It's
is
the contemplation before anything is.
well, it's a horrible illustration. It's the only one that comes to mind, but it appears a lot like window shopping.
Mhm.
It's like, you're observing. Am I even interested? Sometimes you don't know if you're interested in
Right.
somebody at first
You're
glance.
just curious.
Yeah, and there's this immense pressure sometimes when you're just getting to know somebody as a human being.
Right.
Like, I don't even know what your favorite color is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But all the while, you're like interviewing this person subconsciously for marriage. And I'm all for treating these things with more in a more dignified manner, in a more intentional manner. But sometimes you just have to get to know somebody,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
especially in our culture. And so I do think the interest phase is a period of development.
Mhm.
But then to bypass the quote unquote talking phase, which is we have all of the aesthetics of a couple.
Mhm.
The only thing we're missing is a public
The
commitment.
commitment.
We've committed to each other privately,
Mhm.
but we're afraid to commit publicly because there's ramifications of that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to flirt with other people. you
Yeah.
know,
Right.
and,
And it brings
Exactly.
accountability
Yeah.
from people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's two stages of dating. There is well, maybe if you include being a boyfriend and girlfriend, which I don't know what to call that, really. But I guess that's the third stage. But I would categorize 2 or 3 different stages to dating. 1, dating without commitment and without an understanding that whether you will actually like that person, or are interested to become, or interested in committing further. I think there is a space where you can date without having any ties to commitment, and say, hey, look, can I take you out on a date sometime? Let's just hang out. And let's go grab some coffee sometime. I think because our culture has pumped dating so chock full of romance that what should be a normal platonic get together where two people are simply asking each other questions or just hanging out and getting to know each other, that has been burdened by romance, and we integrate romance and even romantic feelings way too early. And because really Pentecostal young adults haven't really gotten a hold of that, the fact that you can ask a girl out on a date and it mean nothing, and you owe her nothing, and she owes you nothing, right? In other words, if you ask her on a date and she says yes, but she doesn't have to give you a reason for saying no the second or third time. And if another gentleman asks her on a date the week following, there's nothing wrong with her saying yes. Why? Because there's no commitment.
Mm-hmm.
There is no commitment in the first gentleman. She is being a lady, and she's saying, well, you're a good man, and well, who knows? Who knows what might happen? Let's just talk. Let's just but yet nothing happens. It doesn't feel like sparks are flying. It doesn't feel like they connected, very well. Which there's problems with feeling not connected in the first date in the first place. I think you should give it a little bit more time to really discover who a person is. But that first stage, I think, is dating without commitment and without any expression of interest.
Yeah, and I think among religious people, conservative people in general, there are two predominant schools of thought as approaching pre-marriage. There's the dating school of thought, and there's the courtship school of thought, and they're very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're describing is the pure dating route,
Right.
But what I've seen, and there's a courtship route, and if someone prescribes to courtship, I think that's totally fine. I think what we've begun to see, though, is this weird dating courtship hybrid,
Yes.
where we take the worst parts of both,
Yes.
and put
And
them
practice
together.
them.
Fuse them.
So we
Yeah.
have the non-committalness of dating with the emotional involvement of courtship,
Right.
Yes.
or at least not the emotional involvement
emotional,
of courtship
definitely.
without the
Mhm.
commitment. Because courtship it's the old school
Yes.
There's
approach the
intention.
father before
Yes.
you even talk to them.
Right.
And this is pre-engagement. We are interviewing each other for marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's courtship, and it's an older school of thought.
Yeah.
No one, well, I couldn't say no one, but there's very few that practice pure courtship.
Yeah.
Now, I know some people say they practice courtship, but really you go back to the early 1900s and 1800s.
Yeah.
I think we don't necessarily prescribe to that, but more conservative circles
Yeah.
don't practice pure dating
Right.
either.
Right.
So it's this weird hybrid between it's dateship,
Yeah.
Yeah, so and I that's completely understandable in communities where young men and young women know each other and have history with each other. That makes complete sense, right? Because like if you have grown up with this young lady
You're
since
talking
you're
about
a teenager, courtship,
Okay.
like if you skip some of that non-committal dating and you go into courtship, you've hung out with that young lady. I mean, you guys were teens in the youth group together. Now you're young adults, and you're like, hey, my eyes weren't ever open to her, and she seems wonderful. Let me go talk to her father. That is fine. That's completely fine. However, we live in a world where young adults, many times do not have very close communities like that. They have that one conference every year where they see a lot of potential young ladies and a lot of potential young men. How are they ever going to get to know them? Are they going to wait and, well, in 3 months we're going to have another youth conference and and hyphen conference, and I'll get to see her, and hopefully I'll get to hang out with her then. That's one of the greatest reasons why we are experiencing a lot of marriagelessness in our young adult populations. Because we haven't normalized this concept of dating. If I have one shot and I will not see this young girl again for like 3, 4, 6 months, I need to be able to ask her on a date and
Yeah.
say, you know what? Let's go out sometime. I know you're like 2 hours away from me, but you seem awesome, and it'd be great to get to know you.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's meet halfway.
Right.
Let's do something like that, because a lot of these churches do not have extensive members, or they don't have a lot of young adults that are around them.
Yeah.
And so they're limited, and so dating without commitment, I think, needs to be
More
I think we need to
normalized.
open our eyes a little bit more to that, even our
Right.
conservative
Well, that's where the
circles.
date, I'm coining the phrase officially.
Mhm.
That's where the date ship culture, the hybrid between the two becomes so toxic.
Yeah.
Because people start to look about these dates not as getting to know somebody, but the public ramifications
Mhm.
of being seen with somebody.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
that means they're
They're
interviewing each other for
serious.
marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's no actual commitment there,
No.
so everything's in the middle. And so Landmark just happened, and I had many people, so and so and so and so asked so and so, and the first thing they would think is not, do I want to get to know that person?
Mm.
It is, if I endeavor to get to know that person, there's going to be public ramifications. People are assuming we're romantically involved
Mhm.
because we're spending time together and getting to
Right.
know one another. And people start judging potential spouses off of, how is this going to look
Yeah.
in the public eye.
Yes.
Right.
And so many people miss out on genuine, good-natured people
Yeah.
because maybe they're not the public
Right.
image that they desire,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because we don't have a clear, defined role. And I know culture has impacted our view of dating so much. Culture can be really annoying, but you can't just will culture away.
Right.
We live in culture.
Yeah.
We talk
whether we like it or not.
whether we like it or not, and we talk about the Indian way of the way they do things, and that's important to reflect upon human nature and how things can be done in various contexts. But we can't just will the Indian culture of prearranged marriage onto our society.
Right.
We have to understand that we can look to a different culture and say, okay, the way we operate isn't intrinsically part of our human DNA,
Yeah.
but we're not just going to will our culture away, and even our subculture. So we understand that we're in this weird dateship culture. Okay, as leaders, do we try to change it, or do we try to navigate it? And I think that's where the conversation will unfold, is how do we approach, because we can't will those public ramifications away.
Mm-hmm.
You go on a date with somebody, whether we like it or not, people are going to assume that you're romantically interested in that person.
Right.
And you've gone, if you've taken that step. So to pass the question back to Sister Vanessa, because I think ladies would meditate on this more than the men would, what do you think would be a good thing to tell that generation? Do you just not care, or what do you think?
I think that it's because of at least from the female perspective, the female culture and how they view things. I think a lot of that comes from ladies, because they think, well, can I marry this person? They're so far into the future
Yes.
than they need to be.
Yeah.
It's like, just go on the date,
Yeah,
get a
it's-
meal, see if he treats you well, be kind,
Right.
be courteous, and learn how to get to know somebody.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
learn how to have dialogue, learn how to
Yes.
be a little awkward and uncomfortable, and
Yes.
learn these things. Like, it doesn't, that definitely is the ultimate goal,
Mhm.
but you
You
don't make
have to burden the
decisions
present.
banked on
Yeah.
And that
that.
really resonates. I told somebody that recently, like
Yeah.
within the last couple of hours, actually.
Yeah.
They're just getting to know somebody, and they're already thinking, what kind of husband is this guy going to be? Like,
Yeah.
hung out twice.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the person received it super well. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I didn't even realize that.
But I mean, and I get that from being a young lady, and then, developing more and making my own mistakes and stuff. I was a very serious person. I was a very serious person in this area because I didn't come from a family that was whole. And my whole life, I just wanted a whole family. I wanted to make the right decision, and I wanted to have a healthy marriage, and I wanted to have a healthy family. So I get that it's weighty. Like, I get that you do have to put that on the balance and the scales at some point, So it is the act of realizing you don't just date frivolously like in a toxic way. Like you
Right.
don't just flirt with everybody and date with
Of course
everybody
not.
and try to make dates
To
for
respect
yourself and try to
yourself.
get dates from guys. Like,
Mhm.
of course you don't do that, you know? We're not saying like, yeah, just date and who cares? No, we're saying date in a healthy way,
Yes.
which is don't look too far in the future. Don't be too whimsical about it. Like,
Yeah.
know that obviously the intention is to get married eventually, but
Yeah.
you have to take one step before you can
Yeah.
walk in the trajectory that you're trying to get to,
Exactly.
you know, and
Y-
enjoy
yeah.
that one section.
Yep.
Like, don't overcomplicate
Yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah.
And I, you know, we mentor a lot of people, and I have mentored some young ladies where I said, hey, you know, they're getting caught up in this and that and this and that about this guy, but across the board, this guy's a good guy. You know, there aren't
Yeah.
super major red flags. You're getting caught up on little things here and there and ministry things here and there, and it's like, just get to know him.
Yeah.
And all those things will go away because when you get to know somebody, then it becomes a little more concrete.
Yeah.
Okay, this structure is really not my
Yeah.
vibe, and I don't think that's going to work out for me because now I know I'm not just going into all the things that I think about this person. It's like, oh no, we've had conversations and we don't really click in some of these things, you know? So the only way to get to that point is to not overcomplicate it and just live through it and actually get to know a person. You know?
Just a little tip for individuals who are in that stage where there isn't commitment. You don't know if you're interested, but you're just discovering who that person is. Pro tip here, okay? Ask your friends, your family, or people that you trust enough questions to check off the big picture items. Are they apostolic? Do they love God?
Mm-hmm.
Are they moral? However, do not ask detailed questions about them. There are certain things that are designed, that are supposed to be reserved for the wonder of dialogue and conversation, right? So if you ask her best friend, what's her favorite song? And she tells you, what's her favorite gospel artist? And her friend tells you, you have now forfeited the joy of asking that of her yourself, and her saying, I like this artist, and you get to say, me too, I love that artist. Otherwise, you have to act like you never heard it. And it's like, oh, really? That's your favorite color? Oh, I did not know that. You liar. You know what I mean? You've been investigating the whole time. You've been asking her friends. You've been asking her, you know, his friends. What does he like? What does he do? What is he, you know, what is this? What is that? And you are discovering things out of your insecurity, not because you actually want to know. It's just you're insecure and you want to know ahead of your time. There are certain things that you need to reserve for a coffee, and discover each other for yourselves, right? And that also is very important for one thing, to fortify a very natural and organic conversation when you date, and two, to not allow your friends and individuals around you to overly influence a decision that you need to make for yourself. I cannot tell you how many people. You know, we just counseled somebody as well, you know, not counsel, but, you know, we're in conversation with somebody as well whose friends said, well, I don't like that person, you know, no, they're not, I don't think that, and it influenced their minds way too much. But now they discover, actually, this person's really great. They're awesome. And they listened to their friends, they listened to their acquaintances a little too much. And they allowed their minds to be burdened. This time period that is meant for discovery without commitment was burdened by other people's voices, and they were biased by other people's voices, that they could not consider that person for themselves.
Right, and there's intrinsic red flags that we should share. You
of
know?
course,
if someone's a straight creeper,
absolutely.
tell your friend. You know,
please. Yeah.
But you know, at the same, Josh, we have this hilarious story, bro. We have this hilarious story between me and you, and we were on a college tour many years ago, and you remember we were with our good buddy Mike, and we're driving coast to coast, and the whole time, and for years, our good buddy talks about this Chinese restaurant that he that he loved. He talks about it. He said, because
yes.
we'd take him to Yendu, and he
He's
said,
like, no,
you
his
think
one's
this is
better.
good?
No,
We got
you
this spot out
on the
in
East
Maryland.
Coast.
And he talks about it and talks about it and talks about it
Yeah,
and talks about
yeah.
it. And we're getting pumped, and we're in Maryland, and Josh says, bro, all I know is I want to go to that Chinese restaurant.
You got to take me.
And Mike is like, done.
And
done.
I
Dad,
love food.
Dad, we're going. We went to this Chinese restaurant, and it was the most basic,
Generic.
the most basic Chinese cuisine
I'm
I've
so
ever,
sorry, Mike.
I've
It was
ever
generic.
experienced. It was not bad, but it was just, it
Yeah,
was,
no,
it
it
was
was-
Panda
it's
Express
decent.
with a different logo. you
Yeah,
know?
it
And-
was decent. It was decent.
And I remember, and Josh talked about, he tried to like unpack Mike's just, his distress. He's like, you're emotionally affectionate and you have a bias,
Mhm.
right? You have a bias because you grew up here. Well, some people have certain type of biases when it comes to certain types of people.
That's right.
They wouldn't date them.
Yes.
And so they encourage you not to date them.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, again, if we're talking about red flags, those are
That's
one thing.
different.
There's a couple, I won't say their name, but they're in the Bible school right now. And the young lady came up to me and said, so-and-so asked me on a date for the Ellis, do you think I should go? And I asked her, and she said, a lot of my friends say I shouldn't. I'm like, okay, well, have you ever talked to him? She said, no. I said, have you ever come to these conclusions about him yourself?
Very good.
She said, no.
Mm-hmm.
So would it hurt to go out and see if these things are true or not? She said, no. They went out, and they've been dating ever since.
Love
you
it.
know?
That's
And
exactly
so-
what I'm talking about.
And the bias works in the opposite way.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that to keep the food analogy alive, I've had people tell me, don't go to that restaurant. It's not good. It's horrible. I went there, picky friends. And then just because life and location, you end up going there and you're like, whoa, this place is great.
Decent.
I don't know if you had a bad experience, you had a bad order, you had one bad. You ever look at like a 5-star restaurant? There's going to be a 1-star review no matter what.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think this is important to stay on this illustration because I've always thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a Yelp for people? You know?
Oh, my.
How much would you act better
Oh.
if you knew people could
Hilarious.
rate you?
Yes.
You know, let me check this. Whoa, he's got 1-star review. But, I mean, to take a step back, some of my favorite restaurants in the world who I would recommend to anybody
Yeah.
have 1-star reviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
You
the
know who
truth.
has the most 1-star reviews in the world? Is Disney. You know who has the most 5-star reviews in the world? Disney,
Wow.
right?
Right.
It doesn't come down to good or bad. It just comes down to interactions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So some people have a lot of interactions.
Yep.
Might have caught the person from a bad angle.
Yep.
They might have been having a bad day. Goodness
That
gracious, I have my
happens.
bad days.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, you're zoned by.
Yeah.
Josh, you ever walked by a student? You're so in the zone.
100%.
They say hi to you, and you don't realize they said hi to you until 8 minutes later.
Right.
And you're on the other side of the campus, and you're like,
And
oh
like,
my gosh, they said hi
they're
to
gonna
me.
think I didn't care about. I don't care.
And there's
about
your
them.
1-star review,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Professor Abrego,
Right,
1-star,
yeah.
you know? And,
Yeah.
But everybody knows that's not who he is.
Right.
And so as far as just supporting your first point,
Yeah.
getting to know for yourself.
You have.
Yeah.
And
to
how many
give
times do
it a
people get things out of
chance.
context?
Yeah.
Even it's like, who's their favorite artist? And then you ask them, who's your favorite artist? And it's completely different than what was told you. And it's like, how did they tell you that? Well, I don't know, you know? And so secondhand information
Yeah.
is not a way to get to know somebody.
No, it's
Right.
not.
You know, the secondhand research can be valuable in some ways, especially if you want to make sure the person's legit.
Absolutely.
So going to mentor,
100%.
Sister Vanessa, what do you
Yeah.
think of this guy? Brother Abrego, what do you think of this guy?
And better people who don't have a stake in the matter. Right.
Right.
That's it.
That's because a lot of people's friends are interested in the same person, and they'll say, "No, I don't think so. Yeah, no, I don't." Little do they know, your friend likes that person, and they're telling you not to because they want to. Okay, just look. Dating culture has created a mess. And thank God I'm out. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm married. Praise God.
Yeah.
But there are multiple reasons why you need to get to know for yourself.
Yeah, and it's a Rehoboam situation, right? Asking the elders versus the contemporaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because, point of vulnerability, I asked my wife out, and we started to get involved with one another, as far as being interested in one another. And she asked her friends, and out of her 5 friends, 4 of them said, no, I don't think.
Oh, my.
I don't think he's good for you,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
One did, and they liked another guy for her.
Mm-hmm.
That other guy is completely backslid to this day.
Wow.
Never amounted to anything. And not that I'm just this great person, but like sometimes your friends don't even have the experience to give you good advice.
Yes.
Because they're in the
Yeah.
same boat as you.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like going to someone who doesn't have a driver's license
Yes.
and asking them for driving advice.
Right.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
and I remember when I first got married, all these divorced people would come to you and give you marriage advice.
Mhm.
And, and I remember one person came up to me after I was married. He's like, how you enjoying that wife of yours? And we just married a year. And I go, it's wonderful. It's such a blessing. And he's like, well, not for long,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's going to crash. And the guy has had 2 marriages, and I'm like, I have officially set in my mind that I'm going to do the opposite of
Yeah.
whatever you tell me to
Right.
do.
Yeah.
So if you have a bunch of single friends,
Yeah, right.
they're probably not the best ones to
They're
get
not-
dating
yeah.
advice from.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that they're not good friends and good judges of character and they love you, but as far as how to have a romantic relationship, go to someone who's been there
yeah.
and has done it successfully.
Right.
Yes.
Not
Exactly.
somebody that has been with a bunch of people
Mhm.
or has never been with anybody at all.
Yeah.
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 It's not that they're not wonderful people with,
Yeah.
with good points of view, but if you're going to make a concrete decision off of somebody's advice, and ironically enough, all those people were single that told my wife not to date me, and some
Yeah.
of them are still single
Oh my.
Yeah.
14 years later. You
Wow.
know?
Lord.
Yeah.
So they're not very good judges of
Authoritative.
character, obviously.
All right, second stage, and we'll blow through these a little quicker here to get into the other questions. Second stage, I think, is dating with commitment. In other words, you have chosen to date each other more monogamously and saying
Exclusively.
exclusively, we're getting to know each other. At this stage, I'm interested in you. At this stage, I like you. I like hanging out with you.
And that's
Let's see where
expressed.
this is going forward,
Mhm.
right? The first stage is no commitment. Don't speak of liking. Don't speak of interest. Speak of your favorite colors. Speak of your favorite cars. Speak of your favorite songs. That's it. All right. Second stage, you can start talking about interest. Look, I'm interested in you. I like being around you. I like hanging out with you. And at that stage, when both of you have expressed that kind of interest, then you can start releasing a little bit of the romance. Don't burden that first stage with flowers
Mhm.
and romantic dates where you take them to fancy
Rose petals
restaurants,
and
because you have to
candles and-
realize,
yeah.
at least in Stockton, there's only a certain amount of restaurants you can take them to.
Mhm.
Right? So, what if you spend all of your good restaurants on one person? Now you got nothing to do. You got nowhere to take the other ones, who you're really interested in, or someone who you're really interested in. I mean, it's just imagine that a girl that you're interested in finds out that you took her to the same exact first date that you took another person. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So save those. Go to a coffee place, The second one is committed. Then the third stage of dating is that boyfriend-girlfriend stage. At that stage, then you need to think about, between the second stage and the third stage, you really need to think about what are the expectations of her family? Because we're talking about her family because I do believe that there is a level of assertiveness that the man needs to take in pushing this thing forward. I do believe in chivalry. I do believe in a man has to, in some way, drive initiative, right? And the woman puts boundaries and says, yes, but this far, yes, but that far, yes, but this far. And so at that point, then you need to think about talking to her parents. Say, hey, look, I really like your daughter, and I'm very interested, and I wanted to get to know you as well, or at least I wanted you to get to know me and show you who I am, present myself to you. Different cultures have a different standard here. Some cultures at the beginning of the interest level, that should be done right away. I know in more traditional Hispanic or Mexican culture that I'm a part of, that meeting the parents is actually way earlier. than other more westernized, kind of Americanized approaches, where you're really not meeting the parents until she's your girlfriend, like way later on. But at this one, like the approval of the parents is very important early on. You really have to use wisdom according to your cultural context.
Not
and your
even just your
community.
cultural context, but the situation in which you find yourself in. Because
Right.
if you are a Caucasian person dating a Hispanic or more traditional Hispanic
Yes.
person, because I'm very Americanized Hispanic, and I don't think my mom would have ever said, I need to meet them before. It wasn't like that for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are found in a situation where you have a culture that's not necessarily yours, but you're now in a situation with a culture that's different to yours, you have to be wise and sensitive
Yeah.
to whatever situation you are in.
Yes.
You know, there's
and
not a
age has a lot
stencil.
to do with it as well.
Yeah.
True,
Because
yes.
If you're 18 years old versus if
Oh,
you're
yes.
35 years old,
Right.
Definitely.
all of these stages are going to be accelerated.
Yeah.
Like the talking stage, or excuse me, the get to knowing stage,
Mm-hmm.
really is going to be a lot quicker in
Yeah.
general.
Yes.
Because, in our circles, there's just less options in general.
Yes. Yeah.
The older you get, just as life, because we get married younger in conservative circles than any other circle. And then it has to do with our abstinent practices, which is a good thing. But if you're 18 years old, the getting to know stage could be 6 months.
Mhm.
It could be
Could
a
be
little
a year.
longer, yeah.
And the dating stage in particular could be 4 years.
Right.
I'm not nobody is opposed somebody who's 35 years old meeting someone and marrying them, within that year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have nothing to wait for at that
Yeah.
point.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Why are you going to wait till 40 just because,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and just to add to that, a nuance that I guess we should have said from the very beginning is I think our audience here, we're directing our words towards young adults. This advice here is not for teenagers, okay?
Yeah.
This is not
good.
for people in the youth group, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if there are teenagers listening to this, you have to realize that you need to get your instruction really from your youth pastor
Mhm.
or the leader that's over you, your
Definitely.
parents. You need
Parents
to
for sure,
let
yeah.
them, your parents need to really have a say in how you approach pursuing an interest. So this is for young adults who have jobs, they have
Who have the
responsibilities.
ability to get married.
Exactly.
It's not the elders'
They could pay for a
ministry.
date,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have a bank account, praise God. You need some of that. So that's the audience that we're really talking to.
Yeah.
And so that third date is finally the boyfriend girlfriend stage of dating. After that, then I think it can and should, at least amongst adults who are more mature, it can progress a lot more quickly too than the engagement stage and stuff. So those are the general stages that I would say. And in engagement, actually, this may come to as a revelation to many, is engagement is actually the only relationship. That's where God begins to recognize the relationship between a man and a woman, is engagement. Dating is not recognized in the Word of God. It's not recognized in the Bible. We've created
It's
that in
hypothetical.
modern times, and we talked about that in last episode, so we don't necessarily have to rehash it. But engagement, that is what's recognized by God, and unless, this is my opinion, and we can deal with it in part 3 where we're going to talk about engagement. In engagement, unless an individual has backslid and walked away from God, or there is something that they did not reveal to you that is major that could have broken the deal off, I believe it is close as, and it may be harsh, but this is how I feel it and I see it, it is as close to sin as it could get, and it is not the will of God for an engaged couple to break it off. It has to be for a major reason. Once I do has been said, that is the first level of covenant. And at that point in time, the wedding should happen unless there is some exorbitant reason that it should not, right? And so we can say
because
that
you had a
we're later
fight.
about- Yeah, because you had a fight. Well, I don't know if I'm willing to, do this after all. I don't know if I'm willing to move there after all. I don't know if I'm willing to, I don't know, whatever thing. That is just not good enough for an engagement. And this is really important, right? Because I know I have never heard in the past 5 years, I have never heard of so many engagements
Yes.
in our movement.
Yes.
that have been broken in my life.
We have to
It's
be
amazing.
careful not to lose the reverence
Yes.
for the things that the Word of
You
God and
have
that
to
God
have
has
that
reverence for.
Yes.
Just because our society or our culture is progressive
Yes.
or
Let your
whatever.
Yay be yay and
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's it.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure of the yay, then don't
Don't
say
say
yay.
it. Then don't say it.
Don't say it.
Yeah.
You
Say
need to get a T-shirt.
let's
Don't
wait.
say yay, say nay.
That's good. I like that. I like that actually. Don't say yay, say nay.
I want to add one thing to the dating realm before we move on to the next question, which is a really good question, which is for the phase of getting to know somebody, because these waters are really hard to navigate. I mean, as a single person. So with all grace, we approach these topics because we've all had failures in dating and successes in dating.
Yep.
So no one's going to get it perfect, but just an idea. Another pro tip is, if you want to get to know someone and you're not necessarily ready, you're in that silent interest phase, and you want to get to know someone and you're not ready to ask them out on a date because of the, ramifications,
social
create a situation where they're around.
That's fine.
Go hang out with people and observe and admire and spark little conversations.
I'm going to ask a question, and I just pass it to you. What is y'all's opinion in the context of the getting to know phase of sliding in the DMs?
Sliding in the DMs.
You take it first.
Good or bad? Positive or negative?
I don't know.
It is getting to know. It's the arrowhead of relationships. It's the piercing of the fourth wall,
It's hard for me to speak to that because one, it never happened to me, and I think it's a little bit away from our time. It became popular
media in over a decade.
Yeah,
so
I
barely
feel like
get how it works.
Social media came on the scene when we were young with the MySpace thing, and then the Facebook came, and then the Instagram came. Like, I was in high school when Instagram came out. Like, that was in my high school time.
Yeah.
So the DM thing and all that culture came way after.
Yeah.
But to our audience, I mean, they're inundated in it. There are people.
But sometimes it works.
That Instagram DM each other over texting each other.
Yeah.
And they're friends.
Yeah.
It's like that's how they communicate through DMs.
Yeah.
Because it's encrypted, and if anybody grabs their phone, I don't know.
But the thing is, for me too, which is hard for me to speak to, right? Because it's like people from cross countries have done it. They've slid. The male has slid into the DMs, and they're married.
Yeah.
And they love each other, and they're happy. And I know several, not just like, I know of a story from someone that told me. No, I know several people personally.
Yeah.
So it's like they're still getting to know each other.
Right.
I mean, if you do it right, I guess.
But then the challenge is a lot of times people that have the boldness to slide into DMs are sliding into many DMs.
This is true.
And that exacerbates that social pressure we were talking about. Now that person seems like a player or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so is there a way to ethically slide into multiple DMs?
I don't think you should be sliding into multiple DMs. Like, if you see one person and you've kind of followed them and you've seen them here or there and you've kind of are interested, right? That silent interest. Then I think that silent interest stays silent until you're ready to make your move. You're not going to make your move like that on 10 girls.
Yeah.
That's unethical.
Right. Right. I agree. I agree with that. But on the other hand, I also do not see a problem with an individual DMing multiple people. I really don't. You don't know if she's going to message you back. Are you just going to wait and become a skeleton, waiting for someone to answer you back?
I feel like there's a lot of young men amening this post.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, be modest. Be respectful.
That's a good.
DM the way that you would introduce yourself
as
to
if
young
Jesus
adults
was reading
in the
your
lobby,
DMs.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
If Jesus read your DM, would he be sad?
Do it the way that you would, say hi in a lobby. Say, hey, how you doing? What's your name?
Yeah.
Well, this is it. Hey, how you doing? What's your name? There's nothing up with this, Shake hands, in other words.
Don't be sleazy or weird, basically.
Yes.
That's
or
good.
off color.
That's really good, because sliding in the DMs has always had a negative twang to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like putting a holiness spin onto it.
Yeah.
Is, yes, it is, not unethical, but it has been an uncouth way to develop a relationship, at least as far as reputation.
Mm-hmm.
Just be a Christian no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's always a rule of
absolutely.
thumb.
And I would say this, very early in my young adulthood, I entered into a relationship with a young lady. I was very immature. That was completely through text messages. We would message each other over 150 times a day, like during work, texting, sharing information, saying things to each other. And let me say this, that was naive of me. It was immature of me, because there is no possible way that you can get to know someone through DMs and through text messages. If you're truly have an interest in this person or are curious about them, I believe a young man should progress to getting her number as quickly as he can, because there's something unique about hearing the voice of another person and interacting with them. A lot of people spit a real big game in the text messages, and it's because they have the luxury of reading it, thinking about it, and then producing a response that they would have never produced.
Yeah, maybe
if you
that's
were
like
live and in color.
maybe that's
right?
like a
That's
whole
a good
nother
point.
Yeah.
a whole nother podcast topic, because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about situations that my friends have been in when
Yeah.
they've entered a relationship virtually,
Mhm.
right? And the one that I'm thinking of was very healthy because the man led the way.
Mhm.
He asked for the number.
Yeah.
And then not only did they progress to talk on the phone, but he eventually initiated FaceTiming.
Perfect.
I feel like
Love
it'd
it.
be great to talk about that. Like, what happens if they don't do that? Like,
Right.
when does it become a problem? Like, why doesn't he
yeah.
want to FaceTime? That's weird,
Yeah.
like.
Well, and Josh hit the nail on the head as far as the negative, the dark side of this, because we've all had to endure the drama where someone has to show you the dreaded screenshots of the DMs and the things people said, and I never thought they would say that. Well, there is a different mentality that comes over somebody
Oh, yeah.
when they're in their bedroom,
Yep.
the lights are off,
Yep.
Text
and you're hidden
confidence.
behind a screen.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
text confidence, things that they would never say in person.
Mm-hmm.
And but maybe it is a good thing because it does reveal the true nature of that person's heart
Yes.
early on.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's a positive or a negative quite yet, but it's very interesting to think about because it's that YouTube commenter.
Yeah.
The thumbnail is a random stock photo of something that's not them. Their name is not them. Their identity is completely hidden.
Yeah.
And they full paragraph roast
Yeah.
whoever's on the video.
Yeah.
They would never go up to that person in their face
And do
And
that.
actually tell
Right.
them.
And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with dating
Yep.
via the DMs, most
Mhm.
likely.
That
There's certain things you wouldn't have
boldness.
said
Yep.
in person, and then but you will over DMs.
it's
Yeah.
that screen boldness.
Absolutely.
Screen boldness. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. There's something just beautiful about just live and in color human interaction.
Yeah.
Go into the wild of dialogue. It is a wild world. It really is. It's crazy because you're right in front of them, and you don't have the luxury. Like if she says something that was obviously not funny, okay, on the text, you have the luxury of saying, "Oh man, that's hilarious."
Uh-huh.
LOL.
But
Ha, ha,
in
ha, ha.
person, you would have never laughed at that. And it's like, oh, yeah. No way. And they would have
know,
felt
yeah.
that. They would
Yeah.
have felt there's something our young adult relationships need to be way more intentional
Yeah.
because of how inundated they are
Yeah.
with technology. You just need to be more intentional about practicing organic
Yes.
friendships.
And then beyond that, like once the FaceTime phase has been approached, it should progress to in-person visit.
in-person visits. yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a really
Yeah.
good topic in itself.
Let's go into the
Yes.
next question because we're
Um,
barely on the second one here.
Yes. Why is it important to understand the emotional boundaries of each stage?
Right. Okay, so I'll start this off here. It is important because I believe we should take the scripture seriously in Song of Solomon, where it says, "I adjure you to not awaken love before its time."
Yes.
I think we need to have a much greater reverence for love than we do. We need to fear that thing because love is a monster.
Yes.
And you can awaken love in the wrong time and with the wrong person. And once you hold love in your soul, Those of you individuals who are listening, who have held love and then her heart has been broken, would rather physical pain be given to you than that emotional and spiritual pain. And it's because we introduce emotionally, we involve ourselves with fantasies and thoughts about the future of being with that person, and we imagine walking by, walking in the sunset at the beach and having a good time with each other, and we imagine maybe having children with them, and you're just barely dating.
Yes.
And your heart begins to travel hypothetical situations that you were never intending to do. You will begin burdening what's supposed to be an organically developing friendship. You will begin to burden that with emotions that weren't meant to be there.
Yeah.
And the dark side of that, apart from that is a dark side, because it definitely doesn't provide that organic growth. But an even darker side of that is that love between a man and a woman was designed by God to be experienced in the boundless context of marriage.
Yes.
Where it can be fruitfully and powerfully, without limits, be enjoyed.
Experienced.
That is where that kind of love belongs. It cannot be held without destroying in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship.
Oh, yeah.
You can't hold it.
You take
It
that
will
and put it
destroy
in
you.
any other phase, and it's destructive.
It's going to destroy you because it's too strong.
Yes.
We were designed to be a reflection of God and the church, and the bond that's between God and the church. God gives us a typological experience between a man and a wife of that bond, the greatest bond in the universe. What makes you think that you can appropriately handle such a powerful and sacred thing with a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship?
Yep.
Impossible. You can't even handle it in an engagement. And in fact, it's so sad to hear. But a lot of people end up crossing boundaries that they never should have crossed when they were engaged because of how heavy love is.
Yeah.
Right. And I tell a lot of the freshmen that are so far away from that season of life where they're able to get married, I said, one of three things is going to happen as I see the relationship progress emotionally. One of three things. Either number one, you're going to leave Bible college early and you're going to get married because the weight is too heavy. That's best case scenario.
Yeah.
Number two, you're going to break up because you see yourself starting to cross lines, but your moral commitment to God is so strong you won't cross those lines.
Right.
And you're at least wise enough to realize you can't resist.
Yeah.
So you'll break
Gotta
up.
back it up.
Or number three, you'll fall.
Yep.
It
Absolutely right.
is always one of those three things.
Absolutely.
I agree.
And most of the time, they break up, and they break up with the intentions of getting back later because you realize you can't put a governor on emotion. It's uncontrollable.
Yeah.
All you can do is put yourselves in scenarios where emotion doesn't develop.
Yeah.
Don't talk about certain topics until certain points.
Yes.
And in the dating phase, in the getting to know phase, a little less in the engagement phase, but you are not required to tell that person anything. You don't have to tell them anything.
Yeah.
Everything is voluntarily. Once you come into the marriage phase, there's an understanding of communication at that point where you're going to talk about the deepest issues, but there's no limits at that point.
Yeah.
There's
safety there.
But under the talking phase, the getting to know phase and the dating phase, there is no requirement to tell them anything.
Right.
You don't have to tell them anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And so better than not, you start talking about when you're in the getting to know phase, which is the talking phase, you start talking about what color your wedding dress is going to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How
And
many
you're gonna
children you're going to have and what you're going to name them.
And
I feel like even a topic that we don't address enough in this situation is spiritual things, spiritual desires and dreams and goals, because as Christians, that's so intertwined in our identity and in our purpose and in our identity with God that a lot of times we jump the gun to talk about super sacred things that God has shared with us in our private lives, and we give those over in the getting to know phase.
Yeah.
And now your spirit and your dreams with God are exposed to this person that you're
Intertwined,
trying to get to know, and it's intertwined because you've trusted them with such of a sacred thing in your spirituality and in your,
thing, yeah.
you know,
Trust builds affection.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've done this in marriage counseling a lot when couples go through a really hard time with each other and say one of the spouses makes a mistake. And it's not like a detrimental mistake. It's not like adultery. And it's just a mistake. They did something really stupid. And they willingly come and confess to the spouse. A lot of times there's hurt, there's pain, but then afterwards the couple is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Why? Because there was a trust built.
Yeah.
Even though he made a mistake, he came and confessed it to me. And so trust builds emotion. Well, you come and share, I've never told anybody this before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that person holds that
Yes.
and handles it well,
Yeah.
you're going to build an affection towards
Right.
that
Yes.
person. If they don't handle it well, there's going to be a distance.
Right.
Yeah.
But if they take your secret and they don't tell anybody and they don't judge you for it, well, instantly there's affection that's built.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand that you can't put a governor on emotion. Once you start feeling, you can't snap your fingers and stop
Right.
feeling.
Yeah.
Right.
I think everybody realizes
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
All you can do is put yourself in scenarios where feeling isn't going to be accelerated,
Yes.
especially if you're 18 years old
Yes.
and you are committed to getting a degree. That's what you feel to be the plan of God for your life. You understand that being married, working a full-time job, providing for your house, and getting a degree is not an optimal route. It's a doable route, but it's not an optimal route.
Yeah.
It can be done. Then you're going to need to put a governor, or not a governor, it's the opposite. You're going to need to put some emotional boundaries in
Yeah.
place to drag this thing out a
Right.
little longer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you go full ham on, the first,
Yep.
you go full send on the first 6 months of knowing each other freshman year,
Yeah.
well then, brother, you got
It's over.
3.5 years to endure
No.
that
Yeah.
love.
At that point, if you've done that in the first 6 months, I almost recommend them. Look, either break up or get married. Your guys are way too far along. I don't know why you're asking for counseling at this point. You all are emotionally
Yeah.
like bound
And
to
you
each
can't
other.
go
And
back.
it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, but it's
you
out of its
can't
time.
pull it back in.
It's out
Well,
of
and
its
nature
time.
takes its
and
course.
Yeah, it's out of its time, and you can't reverse it.
Yeah.
There's no way to like backpedal
Mhm.
from the emotional
And
investment.
sometimes when you're 18, you don't know what you don't know. And nature takes its course where these younger kids, less experienced, and they've never been in a relationship
Mhm.
before. They don't know what they don't know.
Mhm.
They get in this relationship. They see how quickly it is
Yeah.
and easy it is to fall in love.
Yeah.
Then they realize, all right, we're being tempted. We're going too fast. Or maybe temptation isn't the only reason, but we're going too fast. They break up. They go their separate ways. And they build a little wisdom. Now on the next relationship, they do take it a bit slower.
Yeah.
In general, not
Right.
there are people that are emotional junkies,
Repeat
Yeah.
offenders.
repeat offenders. But for the
Or
most
get
part,
bitter. They get hurt for a long time from
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that.
yeah. But nature
Yeah.
has a way of taking its course to where
Mhm.
you don't know what you don't know. But if the podcast can help you a little bit,
Yeah.
Right.
listen. If you are 4 years away from marriage,
Hold
telling
up.
someone you love them
Pump the brakes.
within the week of knowing them,
No.
or
Yeah.
the month of
Yeah.
knowing them is probably not
Right.
the best.
Not
Yeah.
the best.
Pump the brakes.
When I was in college, I was determined to not even pursue any interests for the first 3 years, and I was successful. Right in my 4th year, then I was willing. It just didn't happen. And really, I mean, I'm so grateful that it happened this way. Although it's not the same story as many people. Sister Vanessa was my first girlfriend ever. First girlfriend. And I married her, right? And so, and I didn't yet. I still dated young ladies. They were never my girlfriends, though. We always got to a place because I practiced a certain level of modesty, moderation, and wisdom in all of my relationships. It progressed up to a point where we said we put the cards on the table and we said, look, are we ready? Is this something that we should move forward with? And it always ended with no. You're a good person. I'm a good person. We're not good for each other. And God bless you wherever you go, right? And cordially, to this day, I can look at them in the face and I can look at them with respect.
Mhm.
And we cordially, we part ways, right? And so when you keep these boundaries, you will be able to practice a respectful dating life experience where 10 years down the road, you can look at these people who you used to date, see them doing ministry and root for them,
Yes.
right? And say, man, I'm so glad. Why? Because you practiced a very respectful and modest and
Yes.
moderate dating life, and
And I
you
think-
didn't cross these
I
boundaries.
feel like that is one of the biggest call and charge for this podcast is
Mhm.
that, because I am not a type of person that did it right. Like my husband is a great example of it's possible. I am a great example of God taking your ashes and turning them into beauty, which is wisdom,
Yeah.
So I implore people,
Mm.
just try to do it right. Don't
Yes.
justify your actions. Don't try to justify where you're at. Don't try to justify that, well, but they're great but I think we can work. Just be an adult. Get to the point, follow the boundaries, get to the point where you say, let's put the cards on the table. Let's just really be not partial and look at things for what they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
And then you can walk away and see that person in 10 years with their wife and be like, oh my gosh, hey, and not have that
Yeah.
malice or discomfort
Nothing
or
like that.
awkwardness, but because that will divide the kingdom of God.
It will.
It'll keep things from being able to happen for the kingdom of God.
Mhm.
It severs relationship,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so you don't want to do that.
No.
Right, and and working in the young adult community, there's people that won't come to a Lifeline service
Exactly.
because they know the other person's going to be there.
Yes. That
And-
shouldn't
And that's
have
what I
to
mean.
happen.
Yeah.
And it does happen, and bad situations happen. But as you've already mentioned, Josh, it happens way more than it should.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so these emotional boundaries, I'm a big fan of timelines. I'm a huge fan of timelines. So for example, if you are in this dating stage where you're interested, setting a timeline and saying, listen, let's how about we date for about 3-4 months, and then at the end of 3 months or at the end of 4 months, let's sit down and talk about where we're at.
How we feel about
How
it.
we feel about it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that. Why? Because the 4 months does a few things. Okay. One, it protects you from yourself, and it gives you permission to say, we can't enter into that conversation yet. Maybe after the 4 months, it gives you a reason to pull the reins back.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, too, it keeps the other person at the table so that they can really give you a chance, and you can really give them a chance to genuinely discover whether this is something that should continue on. I'm a huge fan of timelines.
Yeah, and of course, we're talking about a timeline, not necessarily like 4 months is the magic number.
No.
It's like per your circumstance, per your age, per your
Yes.
situation.
Right.
But the timeline is the point,
Yes.
to put a timeline on things. And I think it's really important to express why these boundaries are so important. These emotional boundaries are so important. We've talked about it to people, and I'd want to make sure it gets said on this podcast, is that these boundaries are not walls. So for
Yes.
people that come from trauma and like trying to keep things out of their life and they wall up, you can't, the boundary is not a wall that just keeps you in and traps you and you never date or keeps everyone out. Like, that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is shows you your marker,
Yeah.
and it keeps you where you're at. And naturally, as you get to know a person or as you get to date a person, that boundary is going to start to get pushed.
Mhm.
And that's a natural marker to say, oh, okay, this boundary is getting pushed. We're wanting to talk about these things more and
Yeah.
more. We've been talking for 2 months. Let's sit down and
Yeah.
chat, because now I kind of want to talk to you about a little
Yeah.
more serious things. Do you think we should progress into the next phase?
Yeah.
And you do what you're saying, which is let's sit down and have that chat.
Yes.
Because naturally, I kind of want to talk to you about my dad now, like,
Yeah.
and my brothers and things that are a little bit
Right.
more
Right.
of this stage, not of that stage, not this one.
Yeah.
You know?
Like there's something beautiful about, I think, when a relationship is maturing and by nature it's growing and it's pressing against the boundaries of that particular stage. That's not evil. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Because if in the first 3 months, let's say, you say, look, let's date, but we can only date once a week, and
Right.
and spend maybe an extra day with each other. And by the end
Right.
of the 3 months, you're saying, let's go out again. Look, it's the last 3 weeks. It's like, I really want to spend time with you. those are awesome signs on the road that are telling you
Going
this
good.
thing is moving.
Yeah.
Like you're ready for the next level of commitment because naturally and organically
You're growing out of that
it's
boundary.
growing out of that boundary.
Yeah.
Time to set a new boundary. What's the new boundary?
Right.
Let's hang out more often. We're boyfriend and girlfriend now. Let's set the boundary. Keep that boundary, and it gives you another slow-mo, until you reach the edge of the boyfriend girlfriend. It's like, you know what? I dream about living with you every day.
And
And look, get engaged. Do it.
As we talk about these boundaries and like how it's natural to press against that, I do want to put the disclaimer that if you are feeling to cross the physical boundary way early, then you are 100% chance that you are crossing all the emotional boundaries,
Yes,
or you're
and
dealing
all
with
the
lust.
time boundaries,
yes.
and you're dealing with lust. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That boundary shouldn't really be like super pushed or like getting to the edge, like until way marriage, like you're about like it's 3 days from your wedding day type thing.
Yeah.
Like you
hold that thing.
There
back.
is a fruit, and it's called self-control, and you
Right.
should have it.
Right.
And it shouldn't be a
it's very
problem.
important.
Like it shouldn't be a problem for you to have it through the whole duration of this process.
And Paul said, I give no occasion to the flesh. That's
Right.
why I am a big believer in the third party rule.
Mm.
Yes.
And just don't give any
Put those
occasion-
safeguards up for
put
yourself.
the safeguards up. And I think if you're creating timelines, take your prospective potential for marriage. How far are you ready for the season of
That's
marriage?
good.
Right.
Yeah.
4 years. I'm only going to be ready in 4 years. That might be wrong, but at least project. You probably need to take these 4 seasons and divide them
Mhm.
Absolutely.
at minimum.
Yeah.
And
We're
so,
dating for a year.
and so if dating is the majority of that time and engagement is a year, and then the getting to know stage, you probably need to stretch the getting to know stage out longer than a couple hours. I probably need to. I really like what you say. I think this is very important for couples to understand that there needs to be boundaries in time that you spend with one another, regardless if you just love each other. You shouldn't be spending every moment of every day with that person. And let me tell you why, especially in this young adult context and in a Bible school context, you're only going to get this season of life once.
Yeah.
I remember there was one couple in particular. When we were in school, you were the student body president, and they didn't go on the San Francisco trip.
Mm.
And I remember looking at them like, where are you guys going? And they said, we just want to spend time with each other. They were dating, and we just wanted a day alone. They're going to sit in the student center all day, and so on and so forth. And I remember telling them, guys, I was an upperclassman. I was like, guys, if you end up getting married, you're going to spend the rest of your life with one another.
Yeah.
If you don't get married, this is going to be a horrible waste because you could have had a great day with all of your friends. There's no lose for you going
Yes.
on this trip together.
Right.
And they didn't get married, and that memory they could have had with 150 of their friends was lost out
Yes.
because they put all their eggs into one basket,
Right.
which is fine in a degree when you're talking about getting married, but you're only going to get this young adult stage. My wife and I thought we had really healthy boundaries that we sat with each other at lunch when we were dating every single day, except one dinner and one lunch a week. We would sit with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I even believe in marriage. It's supremely important for you to still have friends.
That's the truth.
Absolutely.
Husbands
Yeah,
have
it's
guy
very healthy.
times and wives.
Yes.
I
very
always
healthy.
know couples that are going to turn toxic are couples that can only spend time with one another and nobody else.
Absolutely.
That eventually, you're going to get sick of the person
Mm-hmm.
because it's human nature. If you don't have balance in your relationship,
Yes.
if you're always with each other all the time, eventually you're going to get on each other's nerves. But if you don't build a fruit of healthy friendships and relationships, you're going to have nowhere to turn when you've been married for 10 years and you don't have any more friends.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to maintain friendships as well. It's very
Yeah.
biblical
Yeah.
Yes.
that you have friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of an entire network. Now, granted, you're going to spend 95%, 90% of the time of your free time with your spouse. But how much more in the dating phase should
Yes.
you invest into other friendships
Yes.
and relationships
Absolutely.
and building mentorships
Yes.
and so on and so forth,
Yes.
Yeah.
and not just putting all your eggs into this basket?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a lose-lose because you're emotionally accelerating, which makes you want to physically accelerate.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if it doesn't work out, you went 2 years and didn't invest in any friendships.
And now it's
and it's
lost.
a net
And it's-
loss.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a time
But
loss.
there's
It's a
no
loss.
loss for having a balance.
Right.
Because even if you end up with that person, you're married. You're going to spend the rest of your life with
And
them.
you have
Exactly.
relationships.
And you have friends.
Yeah.
And you were able to
You
to not-
enjoyed your time.
right.
Yes.
You had your experiences. You didn't shortchange
Absolutely.
yourself on opportunities that you could be involved in.
The healthiest couples really are ones that are able to say, in the dating phase in particular, we spend a lot of time with each other, but I'm not going to lose my mind and get jealous if we don't spend all the time.
Yes.
And you don't have to text me every second of every day,
Right.
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Right.
That's good.
And I think that is a huge, important point for the audience that we're talking about, the young adult, and specifically the Bible college audience, whichever Bible college, because you live together, you go to class together, you eat, you sleep, you go to church, you go to chapels, all together. So it's so easy to just be unaware that you have to safeguard yourself from that. You have to be aware that you have to have these boundaries of time and investment, the emotional currency that you're giving.
Yep.
It matters. You can't afford to not be aware that that is totally not normal. Like
Yeah.
this whole situation is not normal.
Mm.
Even on a college campus, like most students, if they live in the dorms, it's such a big campus. You don't just see each other every day crossing like the one road that you have to walk to go to class.
Right.
Like you have to go all the way to the building that's on the other side of town to do this. It's like a whole town. It's not the same.
Well, it is. We've always said that, a week at Christian Life College is equivalent of a month anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hyper interactions. You are married, as far as time is concerned,
Yeah.
but you just go sleep in separate rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you eat breakfast together, you eat lunch together, you eat dinner together.
No, yeah.
You sit on the couch and enjoy downtime together. and
Yeah.
That shouldn't be happening early
You're
on.
paying
though.
your bills. They're right there,
Yeah.
And then you go to separate bedrooms, and
Yeah.
it's like, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay.
Let's go to the next one.
Yes. So how do you know that the relationship is progressing towards a stage requiring greater commitment? I think we hit that one.
Yeah,
huh?
I think we hit it. The boundaries.
What are healthy physical boundaries, and how do you maintain moral body language?
Yeah. Okay. Healthy physical boundaries. Right. I teach. I teach Christian ethics here at Christian Life College. And in general, I think a very good principle is you should not be touching, when it comes to the physical body, any area of the body that is considered by God to be nakedness if it were exposed, right? You should not be touching any of that, right? Because there is a reason why that part of the body is expected by God to be covered in clothing. You're covering your shame. That includes the arms. It includes the chest area, the back. It includes the thighs, all the way down to the knees. It's a very good principle. In other words, you shouldn't be walking with a young lady with your hand on the small of her back.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't be doing that. That's you need to stop.
That's a great
right?
standard. That's a great way to explain it.
You need to not put your hand on their thigh.
Mhm.
Don't put your hand on their. You're just relaxing. You got your hand on their. That should not be happening. I think it's a good principle to go by. Although there's nothing in the Bible that tells us
explicitly.
don't do
Yeah.
that, right? I think it's. I feel like it's a wise principle because the Bible never first saw dating.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the Bible does say in 1 Corinthians, it says,
Mhm.
it is not good for a man to touch a woman.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
And it's talking about in the context of keeping yourself sexually pure.
Yeah.
And if you look at that word touch in the Greek, there is a sexual connotation to it, a touch of sensuality.
Right.
I don't think it refers to the shaking of hands
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
Right.
things of that nature. Though it maybe I'm not a Greek scholar by any means, but it does seem that way. But he's saying if you're not married, you shouldn't touch a woman in any way
Yeah.
that would arouse excitement
Yeah.
Mhm.
through the touching. Now the
Yeah.
eyes, is a different topic which we can
Right.
talk about, but it's going to be eyes and touch for the most
Yeah.
part. For
Yeah.
men, it could be through sound and whatnot, but
Yeah.
that is biblical. That's just
Yeah.
Bible.
Yeah.
That's in our Bible. It's
Right.
not good for a man to touch a woman, and we don't reference it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
there.
I feel
go ahead.
it, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I have let young women know when I'm counseling with them for my personal life and my standards. If you engage in some type of touching that does cause that sexual arousal, that is already manifesting and tying your soul to that person in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were experiencing this arousedness that is tying you to them because they are now the face that is tied to your heart for that emotion. And if you're swapping any type of fluids or things like that, like you have already created a soul tie that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
That is for the covenant of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like and this is where I say unpopular opinion, I feel like the act of making out, not a peck or a kiss goodnight or something like that, but like making out, that engages that arousal. Like it's very common for our culture to just be like, oh, we're making out.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're not just making out, you're
Right.
tying your soul to a person.
Yes.
You're engaging in a sexual activity
Yeah.
because you're aroused in a sexual way.
Yeah.
And so that should be saved for the
Yep.
covenant of marriage.
I believe that
You know?
100%.
I heard it said by my youth pastor many years ago, giving good lessons on this. He talked about those soul ties, and it's an equivalent of taking two pipes and welding them together.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, if you were to break those two pipes, there's no such thing as a clean break.
Yes.
You're going to get one piece of the pipe stuck to the other piece of
Yes.
the pipe, and so on and so forth. And if your relationship remains ethical, and it's just to a certain degree emotional, and you break up, there's some pain that's left behind, but there's not a part of your soul that's left.
There's
with the
not
person.
damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But when you engage with that person physically, and the Lord can heal all things, and that's in the same context, it's not good for a man to touch a woman. He says if a man lies with a harlot, like he knows this woman only for a matter of moments.
Yeah.
For the rest of his life, he's one with her.
Wow.
Yes.
And he's only
Yes.
known her
Respect
for
that.
moments. And
Yes.
so, though there was a breaking, pieces of his soul
Yeah.
belong
Are
to
there.
that harlot.
Right.
Yes.
There's something about physical actions that cause physical oneness that I believe is sacred to God. And that, I think, reinforces this idea that making out and kissing, two mouths coming together, let's just be explicit about it and be very clear. I agree with you. I do not believe that is ordained by God and that's the will of God. I don't care who did it. I really don't. So every once in a while, a bold young adult will tell me, well, I heard that Pastor so-and-so did it. Oh, I heard that, this person kissed a bunch of girls, when they were. I couldn't care less. Don't tell me their name, please. Don't let me know who they are, because my opinion's not going to change.
Yeah.
I don't care what romantic young adult culture has said about this topic and what has been normalized within our culture.
Yeah, don't use their testimony to create a standard.
Yeah,
Right,
no,
yeah.
that's not, I disagree.
Yeah.
Your body should not be becoming one with anybody else's body in any way until you have crossed the covenant line of marriage.
Yeah.
I believe that deeply. Well, how do I know that I'm going to be physically attracted to me? Are you kidding me? Trust me, you're going to know.
And this is the thing, like from a woman's standpoint, right? A man and his psyche and his emotions and how he works, I can't talk to other than in theory, because I'm not a man, I'm a woman. But from a woman's standpoint, that is why we see all these vicious cycles of breaking up, getting together, breaking up, getting together. You just cannot release yourself from a person.
Right.
Why? Because your souls are tied, because you've had these sexual arousal experiences, whether just making out or more.
Yeah.
And so now you are knit in a way that God only created for you to be knit to your husband.
Right.
So you are knitting to somebody else's husband, and you're knitting to somebody else's wife. And God, with the help of God and with the discipline of yourself and desire of yourself, and if you're genuinely wanting to move on, God will help you,
Yeah.
But you will get ripped like the pipe. You will get shattered,
Something
and you
will
will
be
have
broken.
to rip it apart.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't meant to be ripped apart.
And it works a little bit like a drug. There's a cycle of drug use where a person is using at the original time, and then there's that high, and then there's the come down where you're like, oh my Lord, what did I
Absolutely.
just do? And a couple goes beyond the line, and they went further than they ever could imagine, and they clean their life up. We're breaking up. We're not doing that again.
Yeah.
And then there's a period where it's down, but then there's the withdrawals.
The fiend.
And then 2 weeks later, it's like, well, and then they get back together.
Yeah.
And then they're able to kind of keep the boundaries in place for so long, and then they fall again. And that's sometimes, obviously, don't judge your friends that
Yeah,
get
of
on and off
course,
and
of
saying
course.
that they're all in sexual sin.
Yeah.
But it is one cause
Yeah.
of that cycle.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Because people aren't ready to commit and they're not
Yep.
able to break away from that person.
Yeah.
And that's why Paul says, marry lest you burn with passion.
Yes.
He didn't say pray that passion away. He didn't say fast that passion
He
away.
well knew.
He said once it's
It's
there,
too powerful.
it's
there.
there.
Yes.
Get
There.
married.
Yeah.
You know?
It's
And
just gonna go downhill very quick.
you can't rebuke
Yeah.
it, man.
Yeah.
And
And-
this is why I think that other term of moral body language
Important.
is very important, because moral body language is the flirting with this back and forth sensual emotional play. And that moral body language manifests itself in more than just physical actions, but also in the way that you lean towards them, in the way that you it's the shaking of the hand that lingers too long. You know, it's if you don't mind, baby, put your hand right here. It's the holding the pinky. This right here, just one action can become this immoral body language where I may be stroking your pinky and it seems harmless, but I know what's going on in my heart, and she knows what's going on in her heart when this is happening. There is an emotional bond that's developing, and romance is developing in that. And you have to track yourself less, because subconsciously you can play that game, and it's very sad, because a lot of people come from lifestyles where they weren't raised apostolic. They were never raised in this thing. And sometimes they don't even know that they're doing it, having the lingering eyes, the eyes that stay a little too long, and they're just in almost a hypnotic stupor of going back and forth with this sensual movement. And by sensual, I don't mean to overly sexualize the situation, but I mean it like emotionally romantic. You're in that that hypnosis of romance, you know, and my foot travels to your side, and now it's next to each other under the table, and that kind of stuff. You don't just let it happen. Don't just allow it to happen. You know, there are because if you're not tracking it the same way that you should be tracking emotional boundaries and setting it and saying, 4 months, we're not doing this, your physical body language should also reflect that same timeline. If you're engaged, holding her hand, it's more permissible, okay? Engaging in these things, it's understandable, right?
But also, you know your motives.
Right.
Get real with yourself.
Yes.
Young men and
Transparent.
young women.
Yeah.
Get real with yourself. You know why you're touching them that way. And even, like, I can just see, like, someone who's maybe not a part of our movement, like, watching this and being like, that's extreme, the pinky. But if you are playing with that pinky because you really want to play with something else, and you're conveying that through the way that you're playing with that pinky, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
We're not being
Stop playing
extremists here.
games.
It's like,
No.
let's just get
Human
real. And if you have that motive, stop.
Right.
And if you have that desire, stop and don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, for my life and for my past, when we dated, I made it very clear to you, we're not touching the can of worms for nothing. I think the most, and it was very sparse, we ever did in dating, getting to know each other, and engagement was holding hands.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you to touch my arm.
Yeah.
I don't want you to touch my back. Like, this
There's
is
no
my
need to.
line was way up there because of what I came through
Yeah.
and what I had struggled with in my past.
Right.
And you honored that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I knew
I
myself.
never pushed the boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't have to push the boundaries.
Yeah, and I knew myself, and I knew I wasn't going to do that to you, because once that, like you said, once it's there, it's there. And for my life, once it became present in any time in my life, it's going downhill.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that.
Yeah.
You got to know yourself and hold to that, you know?
There is some people where you can just feel on their body language that they struggle with this.
Absolutely.
And it's like, for some reason, they just love the attention of other people. They love the eyes of others. They love to linger with their eyes. They love to talk and linger.
Yeah.
There
Even
is
among
something that needs
friends,
to
yeah.
be healed, even amongst friends.
Yeah, it's not healthy for a young lady to joke around with her guy friend. It's inappropriate.
Yeah.
And be like, oh my God.
Yeah,
You know, don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that.
And-
It's
and
not
you know
moral
what?
body language.
In the world that we live in today, it's also extending. Let's just be very clear to male relationships.
Yeah.
You should not
Yeah.
even be doing that to other males. Do you realize how prevalent right now that spirit of homosexuality is wanting to bombard the church
Yeah.
and our young adults and our youth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
You
think
know what I
it's
mean?
even safe to say it's between young women, like that hold each
Yeah.
other by the waists and stuff.
Mhm.
It's weird. Just don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, why are you holding?
This is getting more and more controversial because a lot of people
Just-
think, well, that's my buddy. Well, that's my girlfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But there's moral body language across the board.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think what's important to know, even if someone is coming from a worldly perspective, there's a certain agenda that wants to be pushed, and
Yes.
that's sexual liberty and doing whatever you want to do. But there's an obvious epidemic even among worldly people called through the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
That how many girls out of how many have been sexually molested?
Yeah.
There are implications of this free for all culture.
Yeah.
Where
Mhm.
there's the touching and it's okay to touch and to kiss and to wear whatever you want, and then all of a sudden this sexual promiscuity has a dark side to it. It's not just about fulfillment,
Mm.
but 1 out of 3 girls have been molested, and it's and not saying it's their fault. I'm saying that there are ramifications when you keep pushing the lines and
Right.
pushing the lines and pushing
Absolutely.
the lines. So here at Christian Life Center, I mean, we try to draw those lines not just for relationship people, but also just for ladies in general.
Yeah.
If Brother Brago and I are going to meet with a young lady, the door's going to be wide open,
Mhm.
and we're not going to touch. We don't hug girls
Mhm.
at
Mhm.
all, unless it's an old grandma,
Yeah.
or a family member, so to
Right.
speak. And it's regularly just the shaking of the hands.
Yeah.
And so why is that? Well, because touches have implications.
Yes.
Period.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But even if it doesn't build emotions in me, it could in the other person. And
Yes.
so, and even if it's not going to, we're confident it's safer to draw the line so much further back.
Right.
Definitely.
And in relationships, if you want to stay morally pure, that's your desire. Well, touches have implications
Yes.
to them.
Yeah.
And we don't have pre-romantic biblical relationships to point to.
Mhm.
Right.
When somebody likes somebody, they married them on the spot.
They
you
did.
know?
They did.
And so we don't really have any advice for you
Yeah.
biblically,
No.
except what Paul was talking about.
Right.
Like, I'm recommending that you and your culture refrain from marriage, be like me. He said, but if you're burning with passion and you can't resist,
Yeah.
marry him, because you're not going to drag this thing out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're going to fall into the condemnation of
Yeah.
the devil. And even within marriage relationships, it says don't deprive each other,
Yes.
lest you fall into the temptation of the devil.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's what the scripture says.
Yeah.
And even
Yes.
people who are married and are actively getting that gratification that they need,
Yeah.
just a short period of time,
Right.
once you've entered into that season
Yeah.
where love has been awakened,
Right.
is enough for you to fall.
Yeah.
and these moral body language is a principle that you carry into your marriage for reasons like that, right? Let's say that you go through a season where things get cold in your marriage and you are not doing the divinely ordained action of intimacy, of physical intimacy in your bedroom, and you're not participating in that divinely ordained action, and then there is a young lady at your work, there's a man at your work, there's a lady at your work, and that immoral body language begins to occur, the lingering touch, the conversations that are going beyond emotional boundaries, sharing too much of information about your past, about your home life, about your children, and now you're getting emotionally tied to someone in your job, emotionally tied to someone that you should not be getting
Right.
tied to.
Right.
These principles absolutely apply to the married life as well.
Well, and the scary thing is the Bible says that's the natural course of action if you don't keep yourself guarded.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you an excessively immoral person.
Yeah.
It makes you a human
Right.
who's awake in love.
Right.
And if you don't keep it under proper boundaries, you won't be able to control it.
Yeah.
Scripture says that.
Mhm.
And it's very important. And so let me speak a little bit to that engaged couple who, this is something I've heard for decades at this point. I can't believe I could say multiple decades I've been
Yeah.
hearing this, but I've been hearing this forever. I'd have friends who were in love with somebody and they were 17, 18 years old, and they would say things that were both virgins, and they would say things like, well, we're going to get married for sure. And they would use this phrase, we're married by commitment.
Mm.
And they would cross those lines with that person.
Wow.
And then unfortunately, they didn't get married. And now that they've already crossed that line, then they just go sleep with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And but then even with the couples that did get married, because they would say, well, we're going to get married anyways. We're already engaged. What's the use? Let's just, we're going to be doing this in 3 months anyways. Well, I tell them, and I've done counseling with couples, there is a tremendous distrust that is birthed when you do that.
Yes.
Why? Because you know firsthand that person's a rule breaker.
Yep, willing to break it.
You've seen them as a rule breaker.
Yep.
So when you're married, you know they're a rule breaker.
It casts that looming.
It just happened to be with you last time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's that looming.
Yeah.
Well, what if
Doubt.
they break the rules again because there's new rules?
Yeah.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they will.
Yeah.
Right.
Doesn't mean they will. But that distrust is birthed.
That's
Yep.
it.
And I've had couples that I counsel with as engaged couples, and I told them this, and outside of my knowledge, they went ahead and they came to me afterwards and said, Brother Ellis, it's true. There's this trust that we cannot build with one another.
Yeah.
We're always skeptical of each
My
other.
Yeah.
Lord.
If he's away for 20 minutes too long, I'm thinking, what's he doing? He's a rule breaker. I know he is.
Yeah.
I've been with him.
Right.
And so don't allow your mind to take you to a place.
Yeah.
God honors a covenant.
Yeah.
God doesn't honor verbal commitment.
Right.
God honors covenant.
Yes.
And
That's it.
the marriage bed isn't sanctified by your commitment. It's sanctified by your covenant.
Yes.
And so, people, it's just a piece of paper. It's not just
It's
a piece
not
of paper.
just a piece of paper.
It's before God.
Yes.
It's his establishment that he created.
It's
That
Absolutely.
the
you're
oldest
taking part of it.
institution.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
institution. It's the oldest
Yeah.
institution.
And I want to offer this explanation here too on top of it, because I think it's really important not to paint this as us telling people simply do not sin, right? Don't sin lest you fall. You might fall because your flesh. I add to that. I want to add to that. It is because you need to reverence marriage and the power and the beauty of marriage so much that you don't participate in it. It's because you reverence love. You reverence the power and the weight that love has over the heart, the mind, and the body that you maintain your boundaries. And you reverence that. You fear it. Not like you're afraid, but you fear with a great deep reverence and saying, I know what this passion can do to me. Therefore, I will not open that door before it's time.
Yeah.
And I will place things in their appropriate boundaries.
And I think if people would pause and rewind kind of what you said and just write it down and pray that
Yes.
when they're struggling, pray that,
Yes.
speak that to themselves
Yeah.
when they're engaged or when they're dating and they're feeling themselves cross boundaries. It's so important to verbalize
Yes.
something like that,
Yes.
and which I counsel people in to do.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not enough to just cut yourself off from things.
Yes.
That's not how God intends us to live, to just, like I said, build wall, and cage yourself in and call everything bad and sinful.
Yeah.
It's not sinful and it's not bad.
Yeah.
It turns that way when it's out of God's order.
Yes.
When it becomes inordinate infection, when it becomes out of order of how God created it to be, then it becomes chaos. But he created it for a great and beautiful experience for us to have, to understand him better and to see his representation on earth and to engage in this marriage institution and to have all the blessings and benefits from it. And, sex is something that brings forth children. We get to create souls and people, like, because we have an aspect of God as our creator that he's given us to do. So it's so much bigger.
Yes.
It's so much bigger. And when you think of it that way and you speak about it to yourself that way, it's really hard to go and do pornography or do adultery or engage in immoral bodily language. Like when you speak about it with the reverence, when you keep the reverence and you write yourself a script and you struggle with these sexual sins or things and you speak about it in that way, the desire to be sinful really goes away.
Yeah.
When you empower yourself with the resurrection of Jesus Christ and how you're supposed to establish these things in you. life.
Yes.
You know?
Right.
So it's so important not just to abstain and try to control and cut
Help
yourself
me not to
off
sin, God.
and look
Help me,
away. And it's like, no, you don't have to
No,
live
no,
that
no.
way.
Yeah.
You're empowered with the
Yes.
truth, with the word of God.
Right. And
Yeah.
Josh said it at the beginning, it's about seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about seasons. It's about knowing what is appropriate in what season.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't give, you don't give a child, access to a hunting rifle.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
You don't want to give a teenager access to sexual experiences.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
It's just out of season. It's very appropriate for someone in the marriage season.
Yeah.
But it's not appropriate for somebody
Right.
who is not ready for that emotional commitment.
Yeah.
Because it's going to do more harm
Mm.
than good. It's not about invisible lines of sin that really don't have any repercussions. It's just God wants you to be unhappy. It's about that these things have repercussions and will lead to great deals of misery
Mhm.
if you don't learn to put them in the proper balance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because God's way is
Beautifully
always the
said.
best way.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So next one, which is really good. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about it. Is why is it that the feeling of love can be confused with spiritual confirmation?
Mm. Yeah. I say this often. Love can imitate the voice of God because of how potent it is experienced. It really can. Love is one of the few things that has been equated with the very essence of God. If you do not know love, you don't have love, you don't know God, because God is love. That is what he is. It's the essence of who he is. And that just tells us how powerful love is.
Yeah.
It is an experience that touches the very essence of your being. It's something both you can do, a verb, and something that you are, a noun. I can love and I am in love, right? You can act it and you can be it. And so it really envelops all of our heart and our mind and our soul, right? And so let me try to put my mind together here about my response to this.
Well, I think it's very important to understand that, as you mentioned so eloquently, that love is a God-like emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we addressed some of this in the last podcast. So again, I don't want to rehash it, but we talked about so many people saying God spoke to me and said, I'm going to marry this person. And of all the people that have ever told me that in my life, it's not like one or two, it's zero.
Yeah.
It's 0%. And it's crazy. Probably at least, I think 50 times would be a safe number of people that have come to me and said, God said, I'm going to marry that person. And of those 50 people, zero, none of them.
Yeah.
Like it's set in stone. I had a vision. I mean, boom, we're done. We're ready to go. I'm picking out flowers for the wedding.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
Yeah.
And so why does that happen? Is it that young people don't know the voice of God? Well, my best answer for this, and forgive me if I repeat something I said on the last podcast, I'm not exactly sure what I said, is that when one is growing up, a young person, emotions they start very simple and they get a little more complex. You start to realize that. You're either happy or you're sad. And then you realize that sometimes you can be happy, sad, and, and kind of the inside out revelation, and sometimes emotions can be complex. And when you're growing up, strong emotions are either positive or negative, or in the sense they are either from God or they're from sin. Either if I have a strong desire, it's from God. It's a good thing. It's something I should pursue. Or if I have a strong desire and it's sin, it's something I should abstain from. Well, then love comes into play, and it's kind of in the middle, and you start to love somebody, and it's not necessarily a sin. So you go to that default, this must be from God.
Yeah.
Because this is such a strong emotion.
Feels so right.
It feels so right. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a God-like emotion.
Yeah.
And so it has the same fragrance as God.
Yeah.
So sometimes we mistake it for God.
Right.
And that can get young people into a lot of trouble. And there's an old saying, it's a good one. It says, when your mind is already made up, everything seems like a confirmation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And, you can find confirmations
Oh,
everywhere.
yes. I mean, and my husband always says this, the heart wins.
Yeah.
The heart wins over the mind, and logic, the heart wins.
Yeah.
Like, a mentor could be standing there with like big red, like,
Yeah.
stop,
Don't
in the
do
most
it.
polite
Don't
way
go
I
there.
can say, and there will be a justification on the other end of the table.
You got to say it polite, you know?
Yeah, you can just be bold.
Don't do it. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
and-
and there's
Yeah,
a
do not
justification,
date
or there's
this
a
person.
piece,
They're not good
or
for
there's a
you.
reasoning
Right.
why just a little more time. It's the heart wins, and I think a good way to defeat that, because you think like, man, how do you get the heart not to win? And when I was thinking about this question, I thought of the revelation that God gave me when I was reading Psalms 1. That's why I have it open to Psalms 1. And it was in the morning. I was already married. And I was reading this Psalms. And I realized that my husband is these things. Like, it talks about the righteous, and the ungodly. And blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly. And I was like, okay. And the Lord brought to my mind, like, that I have a very godly husband and a very righteous husband. And I think it's very easy to overcome your own heart if you measure up what you're in and you think you have the spiritual confirmation or peace. It's very easy to debunk that or like pop that balloon by opening the Word of God and measuring yourself or your significant other up to the Word of God.
Right.
And if it's not lining up, then no matter how you feel,
Yeah.
it's not right.
And that's why it's so important to have a reference point that goes beyond your emotion.
Right.
And the phrase "love is blind" is actually neurobiologically accurate.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a deep study on addiction, and I've been doing a series in Lifeline on addiction. We started it last night. And there's actually discoveries that say when the part of the brain that processes dopamine, which is the pleasure chemical, the rewards receptor, becomes overinflated and you're receiving excessive amounts of dopamine, the part of your brain that receives pleasure and the part of your brain that processes truth are disconnected.
Wow.
That's why addicts cannot physically recognize themselves becoming addicted.
Mm.
You've never met an addict that while he's becoming addicted admits it.
Yeah.
He says things
Right.
like, I can control it. I
Right.
can stop anytime
Yeah.
I want. The only time he can realize he's an addict is when he starts to see the ramifications of his addiction.
Yeah. Wow.
He starts to see his family cutting him off, and he starts
Yes.
to realize he's got no money in the bank account. And he
It
starts
was
to
an
realize he's
introspection.
losing
Yeah.
80 pounds, and he realizes he's
Wow.
on the ground looking for crack rocks, and he can't catch himself becoming addicted.
That's
He can
interesting.
only see the results of the addiction.
Yeah.
Well, love is not an addiction, but it is it can be, but it's an excessive release of dopamine.
Absolutely.
That person's constantly making you feel good,
Yes.
affirming
Yeah.
you and telling you how much they love you
My
and how
God.
handsome,
Yeah.
how pretty you are, and that dopamine receptor is overinflated, and it actually, so it's neurobiologically accurate to say love is blind
Yeah.
because that part process, it disconnects
Yeah.
the part of truth. And that's why when you pull away from that person and you end up breaking up with them, revelations start to dawn on you, and you
Yes.
start to say things like, oh my gosh,
I can't believe
I can't believe I ever liked them.
Yes.
Because now that overinflated dopamine, and this
Oh,
it's
my
the crash has
Lord,
come
help
down
us,
and you've
Lord.
been,
Yes.
removed.
it's been
Yes.
reconnected.
Yeah.
It's been reconnected.
You're
and,
thinking clearly.
and ultimately this is, most fitting in assessing addiction, but it definitely applies to relationships in a small degree as well.
Yeah.
Love is blind.
Definitely.
You cannot see the negative side of that person.
Yeah.
Right.
You can only process the parts that make you feel good because your brain is hardwired to accept the good and reject the bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to train it otherwise.
Yeah.
And so this feels good. I don't want this to stop feeling good. So I am going to inadvertently, subconsciously throw the bad in the
Wow.
dumpster. And then all your friends are like, this guy's a loser. And you're like, no, he's not. He's got a good heart.
Potential. He has
Yeah.
so much potential.
So love is blind. And so I want to tie it back to Sister Vanessa because she just hits the nail on the head where if you don't have a reference point that goes beyond your emotion,
yeah.
and that's why
Right.
mentors and pastors are so wonderful.
Yeah.
But honestly, even mentors and pastors are fallible
Mhm.
Absolutely.
because some men and some women are great at putting on a front.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have a crystal ball. God could speak to us. We could pray about it. But a lot of times we give counsel via wisdom
Mm-hmm.
just on what we're seeing. And that person could be putting on a front. But if you've got a biblical reference point and you can point back to what biblical righteousness is,
Mm.
you'll be able to say, is he this or is she
Right.
this or are they not? And
Right.
give
Absolutely.
people room to grow, of course, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but love is blind is a very real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me give some practical advice for our apostolic listeners here, okay? I think this is why it's very important that throughout your participation in romantic relationships, that you take a day, you take multiple days on a consistent basis to catch your breath. What does that mean? Practically, it can mean once a week, or maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every month. You take 2 or 3 days where there is zero contact with that person and you're locking in with God. You are fasting, and so you are disconnecting from your romantic relationship to clear your head and get a hold of your reference point, because you need to stay well grounded in the Word of God. The only thing, because when you start falling in love, the only thing that can cancel that love is a greater love. And you got to go back to your first love.
Yes.
You got to go back to God and you say, God, I'm in love with you above anybody else, and everyone else and everything else is subservient to you. I'm reminding myself of it today. And if your partner can't handle it, it's like, I know you're fasting and I know you're separating, but I just miss you so much. That's a red flag. They need to be able to let you go. They need to be able to let you have your time to get your mind clear and hear from God.
Right.
Some people don't want to let you hear from God because they know that
They
if
know
you hear
what's
from
on the other
God,
side.
you're going to say break up
Right.
and
Yeah.
leave.
Right.
You know, they
Yeah.
can feel in themselves, this hasn't been right, but I just can't let them go, right?
Yeah.
And they themselves want to trip you. No, you got to get alone with God. Get your reference point that's beyond the romance, so that you can clear your heart and clear your mind. And sometimes in those moments, it's good to check your bases with people who are outside of the situation, who are wise and aren't involved, who can give you wisdom, right? When you cannot see straight because your emotions are taking you a different direction, get alone with God, meet with people who love you and care about you, friends that care about you, and get their voice. What do they have to say? And they're saying, you know what, we've been noticing it actually seems unhealthy. What's going on? Wake up, and reflect, and really check the cards on the table and say, is this truly what God wants for me? But don't trust yourself, because love is so powerful that it imitates the voice of God. And things.
Right.
So yeah,
Very
that's what I would
powerful.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have a plethora of examples of what love is and what love is not.
Yeah.
You know, and what a righteous man and woman should be and what they should not partake in. You know, what the fruits of the Spirit are and
Right.
what the works of the flesh are. There are so much. And if you are not resting on that above yourself,
Right.
like above your own, then honestly what's happening is you're choosing yourself.
You're choosing yourself.
You're choosing
becoming your
selfish
own
living.
God.
You're choosing what you want to do over what you should do and what God would be pleased. Everyone wants to say, I just want to do the will of God. I just want to do the will of God. This is a part of life where you have to do the will of God.
Yeah.
And if you're not getting in your word to say and be truthful to yourself, you know, and say, I'm making the wrong decision, then you're not doing the will of God. To do the will of God is to follow his word and to love him above all things, seek his kingdom, you know, do his work. And if you're not willing to do that because this feels so good, then I'm sorry, you're not doing the will of God.
Yeah.
But it's okay, because you can do the will of God by choosing him and not you, you know?
Wow.
You can overcome it. It's not this hopeless pit of just cycles. You just have to have the courage to get up and say, no more. And bear the shame of the 3-year cycle you've been in and walk away.
Right.
And choose every day to just walk away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Jesus.
So,
name.
yeah.
I think the other ones are a little less involved. These ones are very involved, you know? So I think we might be able to get to the end. What's the next one here?
Okay. The next one is, what is the line between respecting a woman's decision, trying again, and moving on? So, like, if a young man is pursuing someone and the young woman is not interested or she's politely declined, what do you do then if you want to keep going? Is it appropriate to keep going?
Yeah. To be honest, from an individual who pursued someone who didn't want anything to do with him. Okay.
Testify,
Yeah,
brother.
look, sometimes there's a thin line between pursuing and obsession, right? You're like, wow,
Very,
these guys are
very
God,
thin,
very thin
razor
line.
thin
Oh, my
sometimes.
goodness. That's the crazy world of dating. Look, that's the crazy world of young adult relationships. Look, I think a young man should pursue, but always pursue respectfully. You can respect her decision. She said, no, I'm not interested. And if you're really interested in this girl, give her some space. Give her about 2 to 3 weeks and then come back. Say, I've been really thinking about you still.
Yeah.
I wish you just
and I
give
could
me a chance.
say that the way you pursued me was never creeper status.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Ever.
I wasn't stalking nobody.
And
you know
when
what
I
mean?
said I wasn't interested,
Yeah.
then you said, okay, I respect that.
Mhm.
I respect that.
That's
And
fine.
and if you would allow, just let me be around.
Mhm.
I'm not going to pressure you. I'm never going to push you. Just let me be around.
Yeah.
And if we're around each other, then just go with it. You don't got to like me or give me a shot, but just go with it, And I remember there were times where, I was sick. I remember this so vividly. I was sick, and my husband, who was not even on the radar at the point in time, got my roommate to bring up a bag of like medicine and water, alkaline water, and all this very sweet stuff, and a card with a turtle that had a bandage around it. It was really cool. And he just signed it Josh. He didn't put anything like, that's what I'm saying. It was the boundary. Like,
Yeah.
he did something kind,
I didn't write a letter.
but he didn't
like,
write a love letter. It was just like,
Oh, he wrote a love
Slash
letter. He just didn't give
didn't
it.
I
put it
know.
in that
oh,
one,
yeah.
huh?
See, it was like the calm duck on the top and the bottom. My feet were like, man.
yeah, but you had that self-control to not be a
Right.
creeper.
Exactly.
And even though
Exactly.
that action alone, it upset me because I was like, why are you so good? But I can't be mad at you for being so good. You're just good, but I don't want anything to do with it, And
Mhm.
it caused all this turmoil in myself. But
Yeah.
I could not I could not blame you for being weird
Yeah.
or creepy because you
Yeah.
weren't doing that. You were
Yeah.
just being a good guy.
Yeah.
So there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'd say try multiple times. And, and if a year later
And you never pressured
you
me though.
can't stop thinking about this person, then try again,
Yeah.
On the other hand, how should a young lady respond to a young man who has tried multiple times? That's your deal right here.
That's
Give
tough.
us your thoughts.
I don't know. I mean, if he's not being weird or creepy,
Mm-hmm.
then just be chill.
Mm-hmm.
Just be chill. If he's around, don't be awkward and avoid. Just be a kind human being and Christian.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
If he's getting stalker status, then go talk to Pastor Morgan so he could go talk to him.
And I have, it happens a lot.
If it's unhealthy and you feel uncomfortable,
And you have a
and
right to say
you
it makes
have an
me feel
absolute
uncomfortable.
right, But
Nothing
if
wrong
he's
with that.
not, don't make him out to be that way.
Right. Right.
Don't tarnish his name and go say, oh, he's so weird.
Yeah.
If he's not being weird and he's being respectful, you just don't know what to do with yourself because someone's interested in you, and that's scary.
And that's diabolical
know?
when a girl, he's creepy.
Yeah,
You
for
know.
nothing.
Kind of, it just
just
throws
polite,
him,
you
under the
know?
bus.
Yeah.
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 That's true, right? So if a young man has tried to pursue you as a young lady, I think it is evil. It is wrong for you to turn around and take what nowadays it takes so much courage to do for a young man. Go to your dorm room, go to your home, call your girlfriends and tell them you will not believe who
And just
asked
criticize
me.
it.
Ew,
Yeah.
gross. I'd never be interested in him. That is so wrong. Respect the man.
Mhm.
Because if it's a good man, he's a Christian man, he's an apostolic man, that's a man of God.
Yeah.
Whether you guys are just young adults, that's
Yeah.
it. You're just not married, and it's a weird time period. That's still a man of God.
Yeah.
And you are still a woman of God.
Yeah.
Treat each other with reverence and respect. And if
Definitely.
you want to share it with your friends, then say, yeah, he asked me out. I'm not really interested, but
Yeah.
he asked me out. Treat it normal. There's nothing wrong with you sharing it with your friends.
And the Bible, talks about covering each other's sins and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I know this is kind of a different context, but it's along the same thread. When I was in school, someone was interested in me and we were
Mhm.
just kind of texting back and forth, very short-lived, about a week, because in one of those texts, it was about 10 o'clock, and they text me something inappropriate. And at that mark, I said, hey, I don't think this is going to work. I don't want you to feel bad, but this is just a line that I don't cross. and don't worry about it. Like, I'm not going to treat you any differently, and I forgive you for it, but I would just prefer not to text anymore.
Yeah.
Never treated that guy weird.
Yeah.
Never treated him different.
No
He ended
need
up
to.
dating one of my roommates years later, and we could laugh, we could chill, and I never told a soul. I didn't tell my roommates, I didn't tell my friends. I never told a soul that he had done that.
Yeah.
Because it's not right to
Yes.
uncover someone's sin
Right.
and just blast them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I say that like that's an extreme version, but that goes for this realm too. If someone is being vulnerable to you,
Yes.
you don't take that vulnerability and go and mock it or make fun of it or
No. Yeah.
put
Yeah.
it down,
And
not
the irony of the question is that I don't think we struggle with men taking over initiative; they under initiate
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
now. And so, if we do crucify the ones who do take initiative,
Yes.
just going to keep making the problem worse.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, some young ladies use young men's interest as like trophy badges, and they say, "Oh, look at this new trophy here. Oh, everybody likes me. I just can't get guys to stop liking me. I can't get guys to stop talking to me. Okay,
The humble
stop
brag.
talking about it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, just
Well, and
it's
Proverbs,
disrespectful.
up and down Proverbs talks about women and their discretion,
yes,
and having a meek spirit,
right.
having a silent spirit. That's what it's talking about.
Yeah,
It's not talking about literally be quiet and,
Yeah,
and
say
take a back
nothing.
seat.
right.
No, it's about being honorable.
Yes,
Being honorable to a man and his authority and
Right.
respecting it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that one's good.
Cool.
Next one. Do you have a right to claim rights over guys or girls you're interested in with your friends?
Yeah.
Drama.
Drama.
Look, let's just be straightforward. I think this one might be shorter. You don't have a right to take dibs
Oh,
over
yeah.
anybody. You do not have a right. Just because you like a certain young lady does not mean that your friend should not or does not have the right to like the same individual. Women are not property. They're not property. They don't belong to you. Men are not property either. If some girl who knows that you like a certain guy gets asked to the banquet by this guy and she said yes, that doesn't make her a bad person. It doesn't make him a bad person. It just means that it didn't happen, right? Who knows? Maybe that might not even work out and he might be, come your way. It doesn't matter. Look, there's nothing wrong with that, and don't be offended, okay? If that should occur, don't be
Right,
offended.
right. Well, I mean, there, in my opinion, is the same as yours. You do not have the right to claim them. However, your friend has the right to be mad at you for taking the person they like. Not mad, but like
feeling
Have a
negative
feeling.
emotions,
feeling
bad
negative,
about it.
feeling negative emotion, right? And so, if you pursue that person, you do have to understand you are going to impact the relationship with your friend.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it doesn't make it absolutely wrong or a sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a actual wrongdoing, but there will be collateral damage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All's fair in love and war,
Yeah.
but there's going to be collateral
And I
damage.
think there's right ways to go about that. If you
Mhm.
know a friend has feelings and you develop feelings, I think an honorable thing is to discuss that, to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because obviously that friend, if you're in forward motion and it's not like this competition thing, and you're gonna go and your friend has been sitting here for half the year feeling this way,
Yeah.
then there must be a fundamental issue where he doesn't feel the courage to be able to go and pursue a young woman.
Yep.
And so you're just gonna sit back because they have a fundamental issue,
No.
but you feel
No.
inclined to this young woman. Like, no.
I feel it's more immoral for that young man to not pursue that
Yeah,
young lady.
definitely.
Okay, in weighing the scales, okay, is it more? Let's say that you have a friend. He's been pursuing this girl. She's not giving him the time of day. He's interested in her. She's not interested back. But somehow a spark happens between you and her. I think it's more immoral for you not to explore with that young girl than to say, well, my friend liked her and I don't want to risk our friendship. Okay, are you going to marry your friend?
No.
No, you're going to marry one woman and spend the rest of your life with her.
Mm-hmm.
It is not right.
Yeah.
And I think young men need to mature a little bit more and grant liberty to each other a little bit more, not
So-
be so offended. Even if you feel bad, okay?
Yeah.
If you feel bad, that's fine. If you feel insecure, you feel like, this hurts me. Is anyone ever going to love me? Is anyone going to care for me? Those are real emotions, and I'm not downplaying those. Those are powerful, but those are not meant for you to take them out on your friends. Those are meant for you to take it to the prayer room and get a hold of God and let God give you that sense of value to say, look, these girls may not be giving you the time of day, but I have someone for you, and you are worth something.
Yeah.
You are valuable.
So
That's
let
what you
me
need to
let
be
me ask
doing.
you both this. So we're talking about this from a young man's perspective of, my guy friend has a, your friend that's a guy likes this girl and you like this girl. Okay, let's flip that to the girl version.
Mhm.
Because girls are way more chatty about their relationships with one another, and they're way more invested in each other's lives than guys are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys don't talk about like every single detail and everything that
Right.
the girl did for him, and get giddy
They don't
about
even
it.
remember.
They don't even,
Yeah.
they don't discuss
It
those
was
things.
great.
Yeah.
It was great.
They
Yeah.
talk about something else,
She looked
or
great.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So girls are way more emotionally invested in each other's lives and in each other's stories and in each other's relationships.
Yeah.
So what about this situation from a girl
Mhm.
like perspective? Like, a guy is approaching a girl, but he used to date her friend who she's very close to and who she knows all this stuff about. Like, so what about then?
Again, you're not going to be marrying your friends and spending the rest of your life with your friends. You're going to be marrying a individual.
So you think it's the same?
It's
Well,
the same.
And
It's-
regardless of what we say, girls will hold those wounds.
Oh,
Mhm.
for sure.
And so it is collateral damage. If you end up marrying the person, boom, you won. If you
And you're probably going to, I think from a girl's perspective, you're probably going to lose that friend.
and that's what I'm saying.
or at
is
least until she finds a
if
man
it
and realizes that was
doesn't-
dumb.
if it
you know?
doesn't work out, then you lose the person and the friend. You
Mhm.
know, and I was talking to someone recently who has held a wound from a friend stealing a boyfriend like 10 years. You know, she
Right.
still thinks about it.
Wow.
You know, and
Is
and
she
that-
married at this point in time?
no,
Yeah,
but the
that's
person didn't even
probably
end
why.
up with the person.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know, and so
Yeah.
um,
Usually when that happens, and them two, their offense happened. They marry that individual, and this other person goes and gets married as well. They can look back and are not saying, I can't believe you took my potential husband. Girl, you're married.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You're married now. Usually, when
Yeah.
in healthy marriages, they look back and they say, "Oh my goodness, can you believe that we are fighting?" No, that's not even. Well, thank God that I didn't marry that guy. I was jealous about him, but I got married to another man, and we're happy. And just things, life ends up unraveling if you just
Yeah.
keep your relationship strong with God. God leads you day by day. You look back and you realize that it's okay. It's
Mhm.
all right. Usually it's the people who never get married. They stay bitter. They stay hurt. They have trust issues because of that, and it's not because someone stole their husband or their wife. It's because they stayed bitter and allowed that to chain them down to singleness.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the problem.
they stay emotionally attached to that person.
Yes.
You have to let that go, and you have
Let
to
it
let
go.
God heal that hurt.
Yes.
Because is it a hurt? We're not saying, oh, you're dramatic. Get over it.
No,
it's a
no, it's
genuine
legitimate.
hurt. It's
Yes.
a genuine wound.
Yes.
But you can't keep that from God.
Yeah.
You got to let Him touch that.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give it over to Him.
Yep.
So that you can be ready for the next
Mhm.
person that comes,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
else you're never going to be, and you're going to be like you said, bogged down by just thinking about that for 10 years.
Yeah.
amen.
Yeah.
You know.
I think we're almost done with these questions. Let's
Yes.
continue on.
Is it ethical to date a friend's ex? We already talked about that.
No.
I mean, that's the same thing, right?
Same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
same thing.
Is it ethical to pursue someone you're interested in that's already dating somebody?
Mm.
I think it depends how you date.
Right.
If you
Yeah.
date like the way we're telling you to, then no.
Yeah.
If you date like you're already married but you're not married yet, then yeah. I don't know.
I don't know if it's wrong. It just has collateral damage.
It
Collateral
just has
damage?
collateral
It-
damage.
There you go.
All's
It's the
fair in
same.
love and war.
Yeah.
You know.
It's the
Yeah.
same.
If I agree, because and I stand by what I said earlier. God does not legitimate or recognize a relationship until it progresses into engagement. it is wrong for you. I believe it's wrong for you to pursue an individual that's engaged. Anything before that, technically speaking, nothing wrong with it.
I think there are ethical ways to approach it, though.
Yes, but
you
there
don't have
are
to be
prudent
scandalous
ways.
or
Yes.
rude or.
There are prudent ways
Yeah.
to approach it. There
Yeah.
are prudent ways.
I think that about our prior topic that we just finished right
Mhm.
now too. Like, if you know that your friend is interested, like I remember that was a situation when you started pursuing me. You know, I had someone in my life. I wouldn't say they were a friend, but they were an acquaintance enough that I cared about them and how
Mhm.
they would receive that. And I went to them and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, this is how he feels about me, and I know that you had shared some things with me about how you thought you were gonna marry him. So, I just want you to know from me, you know, that he's interested in me, and I don't know where that's gonna go." And she really respected me for that, and we never lost our friendship. And you know, it was never bad. There wasn't, praise God, repercussions for that, you know. But there's a way to honor people
Yes.
and care about their feelings
Yes.
and emotions.
Yes.
There were lots of hearts that were broken when Josh
Good
Brady
Lord.
was
I know.
taken
I
off
felt
of
the
the-
wrath. I know.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. How do you know someone is the one? Is there such a thing as the one?
We've
For
arrived
everyone.
to the big
We've
one.
arrived.
Bum,
Yeah.
bum, bum.
Morgan, you want to start
I
this one
feel
off?
I feel the weight on my shoulders right
Yeah.
now. The
As we both
one,
look
the
at you.
one. Well, you
the
know,
one conversation.
I feel like we have to talk about this a lot,
Mhm.
and I'll start with some brief comments, and then we'll kind of discuss it because it can really unravel. You know, Bible says, "He that findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth favor from the Lord." It doesn't say "he that findeth the wife."
Mm-hmm.
It says "he that findeth a wife." The Bible gives us very little
Mm-hmm.
ramifications for who we choose to marry. It talks about do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers.
Yes.
That's actually talking about friendships.
Mhm.
It's actually not in that context referring to marriage. We superimpose that to marriage.
Right.
But when Paul wrote that, he's talking about don't sit with an adulterous person.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. He's talking about friendships. And so truly, you know, we see in Ephesians where it talks about if a wife is already married to an unbeliever. So, you know, it is safe to say that you need to have a linked up faith system. But I've heard people, you know, expand that. Unequally yoked means, you know, you have to have the same ministry.
Yeah.
Well, the Bible's talking about unbelievers.
Yes.
Yes.
Not ministry.
It's
Yes.
not talking about ministry. It's not talking about. Now, those are all decisions that you have to make.
Take in
because,
consideration.
you know,
yeah.
water meets its level,
Mhm.
you know? So if someone is spiritually mature to this level and you are here, especially if the woman is more superior, you know, spiritually superior to the man, there's a meeting of levels that takes place, and you have to make that decision. Is that enough to say that there's a one philosophy? I don't think God trusts humanity that much with that level of decision. I personally don't. I think if there was a one, and then your one screws it up and marries somebody else, that means you're now doomed to
Yeah,
have
it's like a
missed it.
domino
Yes.
effect. It's like,
And then you marry somebody else who wasn't your
and
one.
you took someone
Right.
else's
and
one.
then you took someone else's one. And no, it's got
Oh,
the
man.
one, you know?
Yeah.
What if your one died? I don't got a one
no,
anymore.
The consequences.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't think it philosophically makes any sense at all.
Mhm.
I think practically, you know, if you look at it from a worldview, okay, so generally you're going to marry someone of the opposite sex as you, okay? So now we take a single man that's 25 years old, okay? You know, so he's going to marry a woman that cuts it down to about 4 billion. So he's got 4 billion opportunities now. Well, he's going to marry someone who's of legal age and is close to his age range, you know, let's say within 10 years at most. It could be more, but let's say practically it's probably within 3 or 4 years, but let's say 10 years at most. Well, that cuts it down from 4 billion, and they cannot already be married, so that probably cuts it down to the millions at this point, you know, and so it's like 500 million. Well, now they have to have the same faith system as you. We're down to, you know, maybe in America 50,000,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and then, and they have to be in they have to live in your region. Probably not going to marry a girl in China, most likely, that doesn't even speak English, you know. So now you're down to a couple thousand, and then your local region, and then it's like you got to be physically attracted to them to some degree.
Yeah.
And so when you shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, there's probably 10, 15, 20 people that live close enough, maybe 10 people that live close enough, that if you're willing to commit, the number one thing about love that you have to understand is love doesn't ask, what can they do for me? Love asks, what can I do for them? That's always the motif of love. What can I give to the other person? And if you are willing to be in a committed relationship with somebody where both sides are willing to give their all to caring for the other person,
loyal to you.
I genuinely believe if the faith system lines up, God's at the center of the relationship. If those criteria are met, any relationship can work. I really believe that. And we have got to look at the other subcultures as far as, like we mentioned before, because now we're talking theologically. We're not talking about cultures. We're talking about the theology of the one. In India, a good friend of mine took an application. I was just there in between our last podcast. Took an application. His dad looked at the application and said, what about this one? And he looked at her height. It's like like a job application. No, she's much too short. I don't want her. She's too short. And he said, I don't want short children, and the dad said, no, trust me. He goes, oh, okay, and they meet each other one time for 15 minutes, and then they get engaged. And now they're engaged. They spend 1 8-hour day together, and then they get married.
Wow.
And so if we have enough faith to believe that God oversees that process and he gets one and gets them together, and that's a lot. It takes an extraordinary amount of faith to believe that. I think we should be more focused on principles of love. Relationships don't work because of one thing, primarily selfishness. I'm trying to get and I don't want to give.
Yes.
If you go into a relationship and the prerequisites have been met, as far as they're not already married, they're a believer, and you have some sort of physical attraction to them, which in some cases isn't even a prerequisite. But anyways, and you go with a give first mentality, and it's not just one-sided, both sides have that mentality. I really believe any relationship can work.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, I do believe there is such things as God ordained ones for each other. It does happen for the same reason that there are some individuals that God chose before they were born and said, I have chosen you. And other individuals were used by God because they chose God and they said, I want to follow you. And God said, come. But some people were just ordained. Like Samson did not have a choice. He was already chosen to be a judge. He didn't have a choice. God ordained his destiny. But that is not the same story with every single man or woman of God in the Bible. And so there is such a thing as the one many times. I'm more comfortable. Is it every time? Well, I'm more comfortable with saying that perhaps God has a kind for you rather than the one.
Yeah.
He has a kind of person.
A type of person.
A type of person. That kind of person is one that harmonizes with your soul, with your spirit, with your calling, right? With your ministry. Harmonizes with your ministry. Now, notice the word that I'm using. I'm saying harmony, meaning that they could be two different notes. But yet the way that they are played within life, it feels right and together. That means this. You don't have to have the same ministry. You don't even have to have the same calling. One can be called to be a missionary. The other can be called to be a pastor or an evangelist. And it could still harmonize. We make a big mistake when applying that scripture. Do not be unequally yoked to ministry, because oftentimes, young adults have a very simplistic view of ministry, in assuming that because God gave me the call to be a missionary, that I have to be a missionary the moment that I get married.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
I've seen incredible men and women of God who never become missionaries until they're 40, 50 years old. And what if you're discounting a perfectly good apostolic man or woman just because you say, well, she's called or he's called to be a missionary and I'm not? You discount them for something that you can't even tell how your life is going to unravel.
I would even say the opposite, right? You either discount or you pressure yourself into.
Yes.
Because they do have something that you think you're supposed to be united with. Like
Yes.
for us, as an example, which we do use often for people, my husband is, although he has done music in his, background and experience, in his home church. And when you come from a small church, you do everything, but he would not say, oh, music and the expression of worship through music is what I'm called to do. No, he's called to preach the word. He's a teacher of the word and a preacher of the word. I am definitely called to expressing worship and inviting people to worship through music and letting signs, wonders, and miracles be done through the expression of worship through music, But I have always felt extremely supported by my husband and even uplifted and empowered to do my ministry and encouraged to do my ministry and all the projects that I've been a part of. He has supported me in ways that I could have never imagined. And yet we don't do the same things. And I've done that for him in his ministries. We've never had a collision of ministries or that we don't align in ministries, although our ministries are so different, right? But he doesn't play the guitar or write songs or play the piano. I would have done myself a huge disservice if I would have just said,
super important.
He doesn't play, he doesn't, or I would have done not just like dismissing him because he doesn't play, he doesn't write, he doesn't,
you guys
whatever.
are complimenting each other.
Yeah, but I would have done myself a disservice if I would have said, oh, he does play, he does write, he does compose. So that's what I'm supposed to be with. But it wasn't true.
Something to a degree that needs to be understood, and both can harmonize. I think in so many cases both harmonize. But I've been taught, I remember Brother Lashley talked about this, you need to see to your covenants before you see to your callings. And marriage is a covenant. And he used the example of Moses. And Moses has already been called as the deliverer of Israel. And he's so caught up in his calling that he doesn't circumcise his children. And he is off to another mission journey. And Zipporah, he said, you're a bloody man. And God was getting ready to kill Moses.
Wow.
And so right then she circumcises and throws the foreskin. It's an extremely bloody scene. And Brother Lashley tell us, your covenants always take precedent over your calling.
That's good.
And marriage is a covenant. And so be more concerned that if you find a man or a woman who has integrity, it comes down to love and selflessness. They are selfless and they are willing to follow the call of God.
Yes.
They might not have it figured out. They might not know if they're going to be a missionary. And a lot of times that's just ambition sometimes.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with having ambition, but to overlook someone who is kind and faithful because they don't match your ambition is a very horrible thing.
Yeah.
And then to marry somebody who lacks, because I've seen this in Living Color more than once, you'll skip over the guy with integrity and he's selfless, but he doesn't match up with your ambition. You'll be willing to entertain people who do match your ambition, but fudge on the more important areas.
Absolutely.
So see to your covenant. Now, I'm not saying throw your calling out the window.
No,
I'm not saying marry somebody, and so we're also, there's so many ladies just so worried about, submitting to his calling and so on and so forth. And I do think that's important. I really do.
Yeah.
I don't think these are mutually exclusive. But when you start to get into the weeds of, I'm not going to marry him unless he plays the piano. Well, you are pushing that a little too far. To the degree he needs to be a man of prayer. He needs to be, or woman of prayer. They need to be selfless and serve others before themselves.
Yeah.
Respectful, integrity.
Right.
If they have all of those things and are willing to follow God and sacrifice, honestly, who cares if they play the piano?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the substrata of ministry.
Right.
And who cares if they're in children's ministry or not?
Right.
And who cares if they're in youth ministry? Who cares if they're, because you're not going to be in youth ministry for the rest
Forever.
of your life.
Exactly.
You might have a passion
God
for it
does
now,
amazing
but when you're
things.
40,
Yeah.
you'd probably rather be married to a really good guy
Yes.
than that fun guy in the youth ministry.
Absolutely.
And so I'm talking about substrata of ministry, not the important important elements of truly what makes a great minister,
Right.
which is humility and self-sacrifice and
Yes.
so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yes.
So don't get caught up in the substrata. So
Yeah.
I want to be very careful. I'm not telling
Yeah.
you to throw your ministry away and marry
No,
a good guy.
no.
Absolutely
No,
not.
But you hit the nail on the head when you said that if they're willing to do what God calls them to do, and
That's
that's
the
what I
point.
tell young
That's
ladies.
the
I say,
thing.
if you find a man who loves God above everything else,
Yes.
if you
Above
really feel
himself.
that God spoke to you that you're going to go to China, guess what God is eventually at some point in
Right.
his life going to tell that
Yes.
young man?
Absolutely.
That you guys are going to China.
You're going.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it.
You know?
So I'm less concerned. Just because often God doesn't reveal the will, and that's really not how the will of God unfolds.
Never has been.
It never
Yeah.
has been the way that God unfolds in general. God is really good about not telling you about your future. Okay? It is so often like I am not here because somehow God told me years ago in prayer this and this and this is going to occur and that's going to occur. No, I am here because every single day I said, God, I don't know about tomorrow, but today I want to be in your will. I want to please you. I want to know you. I want to make wise decisions that are aligned with your desires for my life today. And every single day, if you just ask God, God, you are the Lord over my life. You are the Lord over my future. You will not end up outside of the will of God. Even in your dating relationships and your marriage, you will not end outside of the will of God if you just ask him today, what is your will today? Does this please you? Does this not please you? You don't have to know whether somebody's going to be the one to date them.
Yep.
You don't have to know that.
Yep.
You can just ask God, are you pleased with this? And to what extent should I be a friend with this individual? And you're going to make it. You're going to get
I want
there.
to stop you there because I feel like a lot of young people will do that. They'll do that and they'll say, are you pleased with this? And they won't feel like they hear the voice of God or direction, and they feel like they're stuck in this rut. And that's where we go back to the topic we talked about earlier. You have a word where he's spoken so many things.
Yeah.
He's probably not speaking to you about if he's pleased or not because you should already know he's not.
Read the word. Yeah.
You're going not really to know if he's pleased. You're
Right.
trying to convince yourself that he is.
Yes.
Right.
When he's not.
And ultimately for me, the one theology becomes dangerous, and the reason I avoid it, and I know it's so much more romantic once you've already found the person.
Right.
But the reason I avoid it is because I've seen the damage it can cause. Because when you believe someone is the one and they're preformed for you, there's a propensity to take your hands off of the steering wheel and like, oh, well, we're just perfect for each other. So it's just we're gonna cruise our way to happily ever after, but there's an intense amount of work that is required to produce a healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
And when you have that mentality of the one and you get married and all of a sudden a year in, there's horrible problems going on and dysfunctions and failures. And the first thing that comes to your mind is not, we need to work on this. It was, oh my gosh,
I made a mistake.
they're not the one.
The wrong person.
This
Right.
wasn't the one.
Right.
And this is where divorce comes
Yep.
in. And let me go find them.
I shouldn't have ever been married. Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were, but I missed it.
Yeah.
Rather than, this is really why I avoid it. And even if the one theology did exist, which I don't think it does, I would still avoid it.
Yeah.
Because I would want to overemphasize the importance of selflessness.
Yes.
And all of those foundational elements of marriage, as far as trust and communication and being there for them and putting their needs above your own and loving your wife like Christ loves the church, understanding that those are pivotal.
Yes.
They're not just like byproducts of finding the one.
Yeah.
It is pivotal to create a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
Healthy marriage takes lots and lots and lots of work.
Yeah.
And so to think that something is just, it's just a puzzle, it's just going to fit. Do some people's personalities click better than others? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does someone else's ministry just perfectly complements and it just clicks? Absolutely. But that's not saying the same thing as this person was the absolute one designed for me.
Mm-hmm.
And do I believe God puts people together? I do believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe God takes two people and brings them together. But that's still not the same thing as the one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do believe my relationship with my wife was spirit-led. I really do.
Yeah.
Brother Bailey told me, he said, when God was creating your wife, he was thinking about you,
Mhm.
And so I do believe to a degree that he can take somebody and he knows what I need as a
Absolutely.
man.
Yes.
And my wife has everywhere I'm weak, my wife is strong.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
God brought us together.
Yeah.
He absolutely did.
Yeah.
Amen.
I believe our relationship was spirit-led.
Yes.
It wasn't random. It wasn't the rolling of the dice.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm arguing for.
No. Yeah.
But I am saying if you have the one theology
Right.
and things get hard, you might have an attitude to just,
Yeah.
well, I
Yeah.
missed it.
Yeah. And I'll say this in my own experiences, like you're saying with your wife, right? When I was dating before, I dated my husband and I went to the Lord and I said, hey, is this good? He said, listen, if that's what you want, because I was that girl that kept wanting to force it to be good, and make it happen. And it wasn't bad by any means. But the Lord revealed to me, I will bless that.
Yeah.
I will bless that. It will shortchange some things I have for you. You won't have access to certain things.
Yeah.
But if that's what you want, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be upset with you. I'm not going to be angry with you. I'm not going to
Yeah.
cast you into hell. You just won't be able to do certain things that I have for you, but I'll bless that.
Yeah.
Or you can go back to nothingness and having no option and nothing and trust me for what I have for you.
Yeah.
So that for me, that disproves the one thing, because it's like you said, covenants are greater than anything else. If you choose to enter a covenant, that's the one now.
Yes.
That is your one.
There's
Yeah,
no
you're
such thing as having
That is
married
your
the
one.
wrong person.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, that showed that God can bless something that is a good thing.
Yeah.
But if you want to build that trust with God and that dependency on God and
Yeah.
not make things happen for yourself that he could still bless, but you really want to live by the voice of God, then you could do that too.
Mm.
And there might be a greater thing or a better thing,
Yeah.
but that's different than, like you said, than the one,
Yeah, and I think you said that very well. My favorite thing about this segment is now every time a Bible college student asks me this, I can just say,
Watch the podcast.
hey, I'm going to clip this section from the podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like we answer this question on like
Right.
a
All
daily
the time.
basis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, I'll say part of my last statements, and I'll leave the second part for part 3, which we're going to
come
do
on.
on engagement. And I reiterate that there is no such thing as having married the wrong person. There is such thing as being engaged to the wrong person, being dating the wrong person, but as soon as you say I do, that is the one. That is the right one for you for the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And you could be one of two things. In your relationship, in your marriage, you can either experience the joy of resurrection or the fellowship of Christ's suffering,
Wow, yeah.
where Christ was suffering for a sinful people that didn't want anything to do with him and was unfaithful, or the joy of the resurrection of two individuals coming together and life coming from the union between God and the church, Christ and the church, and a man and a woman.
Yeah.
Bonus question here, okay? Is it okay, just because I don't know when's the next time we're going to do dating, is it okay for a man to date a girl that's older than them?
Yes. Yes, I think
Is that
so.
all right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think too many people are discounting each other, you know,
Yes.
because
I
perhaps
think
the
it's
girl's
more
older than the
girl
guy.
than the guy, though.
Yeah,
No, for me,
it could
it's
be.
been guys for me. They're like, oh, she's too old.
Oh, yeah.
I
Well,
think
I
we should
feel
go
like
for it.
mostly it's because when a girl generally, up until, later young adulthood, is already on a higher incline of maturity.
Yeah.
So a
There's a gap.
24-year-old girl with an 18-year-old guy is like an equivalent of a 30-year-old guy with a 20-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
is there anything ethically wrong about it? No. It's
No.
just-
Ethically, no.
She might be a little discomfortable.
It just
with-
might not match too, like
Yeah.
because of the maturity levels. But
As long as she can respect him and has respect
Yeah.
for him and respect him as the head of the household, then I don't think there's anything
Yeah.
wrong with that.
and I just want to say this podcast was for dating and
Yes.
entering into the dating realm.
Yeah.
Part 1 was
preparing.
preparing if you're ready to date.
Yeah.
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 So
So that's good stuff.